Daniela, again, thank you, of course.
You're watching BBC News. Welcome to our continuing coverage of the story that has broken in the last half an hour. An announcement from Buckingham Palace that the King is being treated for cancer. Let me read you the statement that we've had from the Palace. They say he will continue with state duties but will step back from public engagement during his treatment. During the King's recent hospital procedure, says the statement, for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he has been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. The King is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. His Majesty has chosen to share his diagnosis to go on to prevent speculation and in the hope that it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. A spokesperson for the King has not revealed what type of cancer the King has, but says it is not prostate cancer. Last week, you may recall, the King was discharged from hospital following surgery for an enlarged prostate, a condition the Palace had described as benign. Well, let's bring in our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell, who is with me in the studio. So a note of optimism in that statement, but quite clearly for the King and for the family, there will be an element of shock in this, as there is for anybody who gets this news.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think anybody, as you say, anyone that's diagnosed with cancer in this way, it is a shock for the family. And we have to say the King is 75 years old. He is known to be very fit, very active. You know, he eats well. So really, I mean, up until his admittance to hospital for the benign enlarged prostate, which was on the 26th of January. I think up until that point, it's fair to say that there really hadn't been issues with the King's health at all. So in a sense, this would have come as even more of a surprise, but clearly there was an issue there. And what we understand is that when he was having this procedure for an enlarged prostate, which, as we all know, is a very common procedure, a very common issue for men of a certain age, he is 75 years old, clearly something else was discovered. He was, when we went in hospital, we were told he'd been there for, one night, possibly 3 nights, but I think the sense was shorter rather than longer, and then he did stay in for 3 nights, was released last Monday. But you remember the pictures when he was leaving hospital, waving to the cameras, indeed as he was waving to the cameras yesterday when he went to the church at Sandringham. But then we have this news released today. So no further details as to exactly what cancer we're talking about. Understood not to be prostate cancer, but obviously was discovered whilst the issue with the enlarged prostate was under examination. No further details being released on that front at the moment, but clearly we know from the statement that he has started already a schedule of regular treatments. Again, no details as to exactly what that will be. And we know that he's been advised by doctors to not undertake any strenuous public engagements, anything sort of out and about.
But he'll continue to do his boxes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what the statement says, his kind of state business and his official paperwork as usual. So as you say, sort of the red boxes.
The line that stands out for me in the statement, he says, "I'm grateful to my medical team for their swift intervention." That is probably the most important line, because as we all know, with cancer, catching it early is important. And I would imagine in the royal household, he has regular appointments with his medical team.
I would like to say definitively yes or no, but as we know with the royal family, we don't get to know a running commentary of their health, and we won't get to know with this. But actually, having covered the royal family for a long time, what we know already is more than perhaps we would have expected to have known in previous years. So there is some sense clearly of trying to be a little bit more open with the public. We know that when he had the treatment for the enlarged prostate, he was very pleased to see that the number of men who'd gone for checks to do with their own prostates went up hugely, not just in the UK, but around the world. So I think, they could appreciate actually that being open meant...
It does make a difference, 1,000% increase in searches about prostate enlargement. So when the royal family speak about an issue of health, people do pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly right. And I think the statement says, doesn't it, His Majesty has chosen to share his diagnosis to prevent speculation. Of course, there'd be speculation if he suddenly was cancelling all the engagements. And again, in the hope it may assist understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. We know that he is patron of several cancer charities. Queen Camilla just recently was opening a brand new cancer care centre with the Maggie's charity that she's long been a patron of. It's something very close to their heart. So anything, in a sense, they can do to use their experience to help others is something that will happen. But clearly there will be a lot of people that will be concerned by the news this evening. We're just getting used to the end of the Elizabethan era, in effect, and the beginning of the Carolean era. And so to have something so significant in terms of health happen relatively near the beginning of his reign is difficult. It will put stress and strain on other members of the royal family. We know obviously that he's personally told both his sons. We had that statement from Prince Harry. He's obviously spoken to the Duke of Sussex. We should expect to see Prince Harry in the UK in the coming days, but other members of the family, as they have been doing, particularly Queen Camilla, particularly Princess Royal, Princess Anne, they will have to pick up the slack. And as we've been hearing, Prince William as well, of course, whose wife has her own health issues at the moment.
We saw the scale of the public reaction when the Princess of Wales and the King went into hospital a few weeks ago. We should make a point that it's been a fairly turbulent time. We've obviously been getting used to the King's reign. We're only 9 months out from the happy time of the coronation. I think a lot of people will quite clearly feel sympathy, but also will feel the uncertainty that this causes, because he is the head of state, and however well he is, there will be concern about it.
Yeah, of course there will, and it would be absolutely natural to think about that. And let's not underestimate the change as well from Queen Elizabeth, who was the Queen for such a long time. There was always going to be sort of unsettling of getting into a new reign anyway, and this has obviously turned out to be different. But he is a man in his mid-70s. Mm-hmm. Health issues are not out of the question for a man in his mid-70s. Clearly the theme coming through from the statement is one of positive. He remains wholly positive about his treatment. He looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. And, clearly from all that we're hearing, hopefully the cancer has been caught, quickly. One would hope the treatment is going to be successful. But yeah, as you say, people will be, not just in the UK, but around the world.
Can we make mention of these statements? I mean, obviously a balance has to be struck here to protect His Majesty's right to privacy at what is a sensitive time for him and his family. But as we've just said, he is the head of state. And as you say, we are getting more information in this than we would have got with previous monarchs. Does that tell you that we're in a new era of the monarchy, that we're invited into certain aspects of their life much more than we were?
Well, I think to a certain extent, yes. I think from the beginning, the King has been very keen. For example, very shortly after he became king, he was out with the Queen. He was doing walkabouts in a way that we really wouldn't expect to have the Queen in previous years. So from that extent, yes, he's modernised. It's a different era. And, clearly things like showing how his own health issues perhaps have a greater public health message is certainly something we saw when he was admitted to the hospital. I mean, I don't remember ever a bulletin about Queen Elizabeth's health that was quite so detailed, talking about a particular issue or a particular procedure. So that is different. But we'll see going forward. I don't think we should expect to have a running commentary on his health and on his treatment, because I don't think we will get that. But certainly the details that we've had so far are more than we might have perhaps expected in the past.
We should talk about the sharing of the workload. Already people have made the point that, of course, the Princess of Wales is convalescing from her abdominal treatment. The Prince of Wales is trying to split his duties, caring for her and the children, and his royal duties. You would imagine that the Princess Royal would step in. The Duke of York would step in. What will be the process now?
I think the process will be Prince William, it had already been announced, was due to undertake his first engagement after his wife was hospitalised. That was due on Wednesday. So undoubtedly Prince William is going to have to step up. The Princess Royal has been stepping up. She has been out and about. She's always, significantly, always and the number of engagements she does each year is always high. She's going to have to do more.
But not the Duke of York?
I would be very surprised if the Duke of York, simply because he's not a working member of the royal family, so he's off the list in a sense. So you have the Princess Royal, you have the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, that's Edward and Sophie, who again have very much increased the number of engagements they do. You have Prince William, you have Catherine, obviously not at the moment. She is convalescing. She is expected to be convalescing until after Easter. So it is a small, tight unit of royals that we have left to carry out public duties. There are the others. There's the Duke of Kent, there's the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester on the outside. But when you're thinking about the core members, those are they.
We should talk about Queen Camilla, because members of the family do refer to her as the Rock, the King's Rock, and she's been very prominent of late, while other, they've been in the hospital. I noticed that last week she was at a cancer treatment centre, at the Maggie's Cancer Support Centre at the Royal Free Hospital in North West London. Was that just a coincidence?
Our understanding is that was just a coincidence. Right. I've done pieces at Maggie's Care Centres. The Queen has been involved with Maggie's Care Centres for many, many years. So that was in the diary for a long time. But again, I think it all goes to why they're perhaps being more open than they otherwise would have been, because we know that Queen Camilla and the King has over the years spoken to many people who've been diagnosed with cancer, and so one would assume that anything that they could do, they would feel to help, they would do, which is perhaps why we're seeing what we're seeing at the moment. She would know, she's a little bit older than the King, but she would know that she is probably going to have to carry out more duties because she will want to support her husband while he is undergoing treatment. And I think it's important to clarify that in terms of, there's something called councillors of state. These are people who officially take over public duties if the King is incapacitated. So the Queen would have been one of those, the Duke of Edinburgh would have been one of those, Prince William would have been one of those. But we are told that this is not going to be necessary. The King is not performing his duties. He's just not able to physically perform the ones that perhaps might be slightly more strenuous. So he will be doing the red boxes, he will be doing that sort of thing. He will be having his weekly audiences with the Prime Minister. So as much as possible, while this treatment is being undergone, it's business as usual. Okay. Plenty of reaction coming in, some of which we'll bring you over the course of the next hour. Let me just read you very quickly the reaction from the Prime Minister's office. Rishi Sunak has posted on social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, that he wishes King Charles a full and speedy recovery after it was revealed the King had been diagnosed with cancer. He also stated that he knows the whole country will be wishing him well. Keir Starmer also, on behalf of the Labour Party, I wish His Majesty all the very best for his recovery. We look forward to seeing him back to swift, full health. So some political reaction already coming in. Let us speak to Nicholas Witchell, who is on the line and has been already reacting to the news that we've had from the palace in the last hour. Nick, good to have you with us on the programme. We were just saying there is a positive element to the statement we've had from Buckingham Palace, but for anybody who is diagnosed with cancer, it's an immense shock and takes some getting used to.
Yeah, exactly. It is something that whoever you are, however mighty or however humble your position, takes an adjustment, a psychological adjustment. That awful word when the surgeon says to you that, yes, you have cancer. For him, for his family, in the days since he was discharged from hospital for the treatment for the enlarged prostate, a benign condition, we're told, they will have had to just come to terms with the reality of the situation in which they find themselves. Now, he's a man in his mid-70s. He is fit. He is resilient. He keeps himself in good shape. So those will be positive aspects of this. But it is now a matter for the surgeons, for the medical team, the Royal Medical Household, to carry on with the treatment, which we are told has already begun. And we are told by Buckingham Palace that there are positive aspects to all of this, that this cancer, this unspecified, unidentified cancer, it's not prostate cancer, as one might have assumed, but it is a cancer nonetheless, a cancer which they have discovered in the course of treating the enlarged prostate. So it will be, one imagines, a complex program of treatment, a treatment that, of course, many millions of people have had to get used to, come to terms with, and deal with in their lives. And I think both the King and Buckingham Palace feel that there is merit now in being as open as possible about the situation in which he finds himself. And of course, this is in marked contrast to the older generation of members of the British royal family who regarded confidentiality about medical matters as a priority. So, of course, we learnt very little about the condition of the late Queen, Queen Elizabeth, who died just 17 months ago. In terms of the implications for other members of the British royal family, well, as Sarah was saying just a moment ago, there will be now much greater pressure on other senior members, in particular Prince William, in particular on Queen Camilla, who will be expected to step forward and take over at least some of those public-facing duties that hitherto had been expected to be performed by King Charles. And it is the hope, Buckingham Palace tells us, that he will be able to resume those public-facing duties as soon as possible. But in reality, that surely is going to be a matter of months now, and will depend entirely on how that treatment performed by the medical specialists, how that treatment goes.
There will, of course, be sympathy for the Prince of Wales, who is looking after his wife, who is convalescing at the moment, Nick, and now having to deal with the news that his father has cancer. It puts enormous pressure on the Prince.
It does. It reminds us how depleted the British royal family is now. The King's younger brother, Andrew, having to retire from public royal duties for all the reasons with which we are familiar. A man who is effectively in disgrace, is unable to resume any public role. And of course, Prince Harry, the Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, having left the royal family, moved to California. We learned tonight that Prince Harry has been in touch with his father and is expected to come to the United Kingdom to show support for him. So as with families everywhere, families around the world, when they're confronted by a medical difficulty of this magnitude, for all the positive elements that we're being told there are by Buckingham Palace, it is still cancer. It is still potentially a very serious medical condition, and in that situation, families come together, put differences aside, and I'm sure that they will want to give as much support as possible, both to the King on a family basis within the matrix of the family, and of course to Camilla. Now, she's not, as they say, a blood royal. She's not been doing this all her life. She married into the British royal family, but she's been, I think, accepted by the British public in her role as Queen, perhaps more fully than some might have expected, given all the history going back over the decades. But it will be to her that many people will now look to take on a greater public role, and in particular, as you say, to Prince William, who will now have to combine that added responsibility, those added duties, with his wish to care for his recuperating wife, to support Catherine in her recovery from the serious surgery, abdominal surgery, that she has undergone in recent weeks. So, yes, a challenging time for the British royal family.
Nick, you've covered the King's royal duties for many years, while he was Prince of Wales, of course. He turned 75 in November. I tend to think, as Sarah was saying, that generally speaking, he's been in fairly good health. Would that be right?
Yes, I think he has. As I mentioned a moment ago, he keeps himself fit. There have been no major health episodes in his life. He's had bumps and scrapes and falls and broken arms and bits and pieces. He had COVID, of course, very early on during that particular episode. But there have been no serious medical episodes that I can just immediately recall. So the fact that he went in for treatment for benign and enlarged prostate, benign though it was, and the fact that Buckingham Palace was so open about that, I think that was something of a surprise, coming as it did in parallel with the admission to hospital of the Princess of Wales for that abdominal surgery. But perhaps there were some clues that he stayed in hospital for that comparatively straightforward procedure, perhaps longer than some might have expected, because of course it was during the investigation and the treatment of that benign prostate enlargement that the doctors found what we now understand is a separate cancer, an unidentified cancer, but not prostate cancer. And it is that condition which they are now starting to treat.
Nicholas Witchell, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Let's go to our home editor, Mark Easton, who is at Buckingham Palace in our screens. Mark, as we look at the palace, we're obviously bound to think of matters of state at this time. What do you think has been going on in the background over the last 24, 48 hours?
Yeah, I think it's been a bit more than that, actually. Interesting that he's come to Buckingham Palace. He's at his place of work. His flag is flying at over the palace this evening. And I think what's really telling from the way that the statement has been put together, enormous care has been taken to say that the king is he's not being king anymore. He's absolutely there doing all that he needs to do in terms of his state functions. Yes, some public-facing events will go, but actually he will do his red boxes. He will have his weekly meeting with the Prime Minister. He will attend, or at least be in attendance at Privy Council meetings and so on. And I think you can tell in the way that this announcement has been made, the care that has gone into the statement, the information that's been given to the media. Some of it we were unable to report until 6 o'clock this evening. It was all embargoed, but a real sense that there's been a lot of planning. Now, of course, there is a whole system of protocols designed to make sure that the British state doesn't miss a beat when the head of it has to step back, as indeed has happened on this occasion. So we will know that probably a few days ago, as soon as the king was aware of this diagnosis, his private secretary will have been in touch with the Prime Minister's private secretary and the Cabinet Secretary, the so-called Golden Triangle, to ensure that all the bits of government and constitution are joined together. There's that. I also think it's interesting, that we did have those photographs from yesterday morning at St Mary Magdalene Church in Sandringham, because it was a sort of, I think now we see it, and it's a sort of statement, isn't it? It's sort of saying, I'm here, I'm still your king, I'm still very much connected to the people, I'm smiling, I'm waving, I'm visible. And I'm sure that when they were thinking about how they were going to do this, there would have been planning about we want to make sure that the king is not invisible. There's been a new portrait issued by the palace, which was taken in France recently, of the king. Again, important that the king is still visible. He will, of course, not be visible for a considerable time now, but those images in the last few days, I think, have been very carefully thought out. And also that sense that he is going to carry on with all these duties, that he is going to, despite, it would have been relatively easy for him to say, look, I've got cancer, I'm going to have to step back. That there are systems for ensuring that all happens. These councillors of state, as you've been discussing earlier, that would be, the Queen Camilla, Prince William, and so on. The group of people who could have been brought in to take over far more of his duties, but the king has quite clearly said no. I don't even want them to be in the available. We don't need that. I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to be somebody who is at my desk doing what I need to do as much as I possibly can. And I think there's been a lot of messaging here to the British public to say I am the king, and I will continue to be your king despite everything that's going on with my health right now.
Mark, just in terms of the foreign trips that will be planned, because the diary is arranged many weeks and months in advance, what is on the diary? How important is it to the King himself? And what do you think will be considered over the coming weeks as to what he does with those visits?
Well, of course, a lot of it's going to depend on the sort of prognosis of the medical treatment, how long it's all going to take and how much impact it has on his health. But you're right. I mean, there are two big foreign royal visits planned for this year, one to Canada in May and another really major trip to Australia, to New Zealand, which he was due to go to in October. He may still go, we shall see. And then he was also, and I think this will be a matter of some discussion to see whether this is possible, he was supposed to go as the head of the Commonwealth to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which this year will be in Samoa. So that will sort of be between Australia and New Zealand. That was the plan. Now, I suspect there's a big question mark over both those royal trips. Is he going to be healthy enough? They are, they're really hard work, a lot of traveling. You don't want to do that if you're really struggling with something like cancer. So I think there will be real questions as to whether he will go or whether, in fact, perhaps Prince William will go in his stead. It would be, I think, a huge disappointment to the King. He is a huge supporter of the Commonwealth. He is immensely proud to be its head. He will have been very much looking forward to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa. And I think he really wants to, he's been waiting all his life to be king. And this is what he needs to do. He needs to go out to the other countries that form part of his wider kingdom, the 14 countries outside the UK, of which he is sovereign. So I'm sure there will be, discussions in Buckingham Palace and elsewhere, trying to work out, what is the best way? Do we have to cancel now? Can we wait and see how the King's condition is in say, 2 months from now? But of course the planning, there's so much planning, so much detailed agenda setting before these visits. So they'll have to move fairly quickly, I think, to work out what's best to do.
Just a general reflection, Mark, about how this will be received around the country. I mean, we shouldn't be too sensationalist about it. There are lots of people around the country who get this sort of news, shocking news as it is, and come to terms with living with cancer. But just generally speaking about this king, 9 months on from the coronation, and how the country will react to it.
Well, of course, it is a reminder that our king is 74 years old, be 75 later this year, and he's an older man, isn't he? And his health has always, people had always said, he's going to come to the throne, as a pensioner, So I think there will be that will be a reminder that we do have an elderly sovereign. But as Nicholas Witchell was saying just now, he's actually been pretty healthy. He looks after himself, and I think the messaging, again, going back to that, I think is very much of a monarch who is utterly determined that whatever kind of medical setbacks there are, he is going to continue to do that. In terms of public reaction, I think, yes, there will be a shock among many people. A cancer diagnosis for any individual, any family, is a big shock. And to many people in this country, King Charles having cancer, it will discombobulate them a little bit. We need somebody strong. We need somebody who is fit and well to be our head of state. And I think they'll be concerned on a personal level too. I think that what the king is trying to do here is almost use this awful situation as an opportunity to say, look, I know as a human being that, as you were saying, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are diagnosed with cancer, every year, and it's a massive shock. And he has to do that in a way that people can look at and feel he did that right. He did that properly, and he's a better king for it. If he were to get this wrong, that would be very serious for a monarch who's only been in the job for 17 months. So I think the public will I think there will be shock. I think there will be huge sympathy for a man, who we've known, most people have known all their lives as either the heir to the throne or now as king. And I think there will be real concern among many people for him and for his family, real sympathy. But I think from the king's point of view, he wants to say, yes, I've got cancer, but you know what? I'm going to carry on being your king.
Indeed so, and we wish him well. Mark Easton at Buckingham Palace, thank you very much indeed for that. You're watching BBC News. If you are just joining us, welcome to our continuing coverage of this breaking story. An announcement from Buckingham Palace in the last hour that the King is being treated for cancer. He will continue his state duties, but will step back from public engagements during his treatment. The statement says that during the King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he has been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. The King is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, says the statement, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. It also goes on to say that His Majesty has chosen to share this diagnosis to prevent speculation and in the hope that it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. A spokesperson for the King has not revealed what type of cancer the King has, but says it is not prostate cancer. Well, last week the King was discharged from hospital following surgery for an enlarged prostate, a condition the palace had described as benign. He is back at Buckingham Palace tonight, but yesterday, Sunday, he was at St Mary Magdalene Church in Sandringham, and as you can see from these pictures, in fairly good spirits, waving and smiling with crowds of well-wishers who had turned up to see the royal couple. Well, let's go live to the BBC's former royal correspondent, Jenny Bond, who is joining us from Devon. Good evening to you, Jenny. Thank you for being with us. Your reaction to what you've heard tonight?
Well, I mean, it's obviously very shocking news, and it's been a shocking year so far in health terms for the royal family. I mean, it's very sad that the King has had this diagnosis, but I do think that we should take his lead, and his lead is quite relentlessly upbeat and positive. I think perhaps you could view this as a blessing in disguise, that because of his enlarged prostate, tests were carried out, diagnostic tests, which have shown a form of cancer, we're told. And he has begun treatment so swiftly, so promptly, a treatment which is going to take him out from public-facing duties. So we can assume from that, I think, that it's going to make him, feel a bit rough. But he is so positive about the fact that he will be back to health and back on duty before too long. So I think we shouldn't get too doom-laden about this, but clearly it's a blow. It brings you up very short when you're 75 against the very fact of your mortality. And the fact that he's just started his reign and he wanted to achieve and wants to achieve so much. So this is an undeniable setback.
Yeah, we've heard a lot, Jenny, in recent years about the case for a slimmed-down monarchy. But for the time being, at least, as you say, given what we've heard about the health of several members of the royal family, it's looking alarmingly lean, particularly as the King is forced into this extended convalescence. Do you think they'll be reflecting on that within the palace?
Oh, well, I think they'll all be thinking that the Princess Royal never spoke a truer word than when recently she said, I don't really know what they're talking about with the slimmed-down monarchy. From where I'm standing, this looks like a very bad idea, she said. And there simply aren't enough royals to go around now for all the many requests for their presence. And so there will be disappointed charities and institutions in the coming weeks and months because of Catherine and obviously the King. William is beginning royal duties again later this week, but this too, I mean, think of William. This is going to bring him up pretty short as well, with the fact that he is the heir, and he I'm sure he doesn't want any of that responsibility quite yet, and so it will give him food for thought. And of course, we've got Harry coming back to see his father. Again, I suppose we could say perhaps that's a blessing in disguise, in that maybe the longed for reconciliation finally will happen because his father is ill. So it's incredibly sad, and I do feel for Camilla particularly. This is her man, her love, and they are so dependent on one another, really, and so comfortable with one another, which is why she spent so much time at the hospital when he was there for 3 days. And she will be feeling quite bereft, obviously, and worried and scared about the diagnosis. That would be entirely normal.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when we think about it, it's perhaps pertinent to think of the emotional toll it takes on the families. It would for any family that is in the same circumstances. It's, as you say, it's an institution that adapts and evolves according to the demands of the moment. In terms of what goes on behind palace walls at a time like this, how do they arrange the diary and ensure that all duties are covered?
Well, I don't think they've had a situation like this. In the 35 years I've been covering the royals, I can't think of a time when 3 senior royals have been out of action for an extended period of time. So they'll be jiggling the appointments around, the engagements around. They'll be making calls, I'll say, to disappointed charities and organisations, but I think everyone will understand. And they will be trying to remain calm and cheerful and put out these messages showing that we shouldn't be doom laden about this. But I'm sure that they too will be somewhat shocked at the torrent of events that have come their way in the past few weeks.
We're all told, those who know people with cancer or people who suffered from cancer, that positive mental attitude is the way to deal with it. I mean, you've covered the King and the Prince as was for many, many years. How does he deal with health issues? What will his state of mind be like right now? Is he the right sort of person to deal with this?
Well, he can be quite a brooding personality, actually. And I think, like any man of 75, he's going to be concerned about this. But I think he, as well as the rest of us, know that there have been tremendous strides made in cancer treatment. This is a form of cancer. We're told not to speculate. What could that mean? Lymphoma? I don't know what it means, but and he doesn't want us to know precisely the details. But I think he will be trying to be as cheerful as he can be. And Camilla, while I say she will be obviously worried about her husband, she is by nature a very cheerful, positive person. So I think she will be invaluable to him as he goes through this treatment.
Just a word on Queen Camilla and the journey that she's been on. She was at a cancer treatment centre on Thursday, and I think Robert Hardman was making the point that she really has stepped into the breach of late and has really taken on such an important role within the family, hasn't she?
Well, she really has. And just to step inside her head, actually, as she was at that cancer treatment clinic, when she must have known already that this diagnosis had been made and was coming. And when she said that the King is doing his best, I thought it was a slightly strange expression, actually, doing his best. It wasn't a ringing endorsement of his state of health. So she's been carrying out these engagements and, flying the flag very much for the monarchy, with obviously a great deal of worry going on in her head. I think she's won a great deal of admiration and a lot of respect, and she's going to have to carry on being the face of the monarchy as William slowly resumes his royal duties and the King is out of action and Catherine remains at home.
Mark Urban was making the point that things don't happen by accident within the royal family. The appearance on Sunday at Mary Magdalene's church at Sandringham, was there any significance to that? Is it a place that the royal family likes to go at times like this?
Well, I mean, he always goes to church on a Sunday, and if he's in Sandringham, that's where he goes. So it to all intents and purposes, and I think this was the purpose. It looked entirely normal. That's what you'd expect the King to do. So we all sat back and looked at pictures and saw them in the papers this morning. Well, there we are. He's over his operation. All is well in the world again. But it was obviously choreographed, planned to show that he is okay. He's already started his treatment, and as we could see for him yesterday, he's still looking okay. And I think the palace and the king wanted us to have that reassurance before making this statement today.
Jenny, thank you for joining us this evening. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Well, there have been, as you would expect, responses from politics this evening. From Westminster, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, issued a statement wishing His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. I've no doubt, he said, he'll be back to full strength in no time, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said, on behalf of the Labour Party, I wish His Majesty all the very best for his recovery. We look forward to seeing him back to swift full health. And also this statement from the First Minister of Scotland, Hamza Youssef. He said, my thoughts and prayers are with His Majesty the King. I wish him the very best for a speedy recovery and return to public life. My thoughts are also with Her Majesty the Queen and other members of the royal family at what I know will be a worrying time for them all. The Northern Ireland First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, who's had a very important day today in Belfast, said this: I'm very sorry to hear of King Charles's illness, and I want to wish him well for his treatment and a full and speedy recovery. The leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, said His Majesty the King, he sent every good wish as he commences his treatment. We pray, he said, for a full and speedy recovery. And also from the Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford, I'm saddened to hear the news that King Charles III is facing further health challenges. My thoughts and those of the people across Wales will be with him and his family this evening. I send my very best wishes as he starts treatment for a full and swift recovery. Well, with me here in the studio, our health editor Hugh Pym, and also our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell. Let me just start with you, Hugh, because there will be lots of people who themselves are watching tonight who are dealing with cancer or know someone who is. What do you make of the statement and why it was issued in this way?
Well, it's interesting actually to see the statement and to hear some of the briefing around it, that we know that cancer risk does increase with age. In fact, a third of new cancers every year diagnosed are in those 75 and over. So there'll be quite a few people out there in a similar position who've just had a diagnosis, which will come as a bit of a shock. But we've heard the King say that he's positive about his treatment. What we don't know is what that treatment will be. We know that it's not prostate cancer. The palace have made that very clear, but they haven't said what sort of cancer it is. We know that it was detected as part of his treatment for benign prostate enlargement, and it seems that that was fortuitous, that it was picked up. Whether it was picked up by a scan or some other form of test is not entirely clear, but we're not really sure exactly how advanced it is at this stage. And we know he's had outpatient treatment. He's come down from Sandringham, had outpatient treatment, and then, to use the expression of the palace, he remains at home in London. So there are some unknowns in all this, but the general tenor of it is that the King wanted to get the news out there because, as the palace said, he was Prince of Wales, was at the time patron of several cancer charities, and he's spoken out in the past on behalf of patients, NHS staff and their families. So getting the news out there the minute he started his treatment was what the King wanted. And of course, when this benign prostate enlargement was announced and he went on for treatment of that, it was made clear he wanted that news out there. And in fact, within a day or so, there'd been a lot of traffic to National Health Service websites and calls into helplines, and that raising of awareness, we gather the King was reassured by that.
Well, I was just saying to Sarah, I mean, I think there was 1,000% increase in people looking online for prostate enlargement. It reminded me to go and get a test. I went and got a test just last week, actually, and I would encourage others to go and do that, because it shows, actually, if you do go and you pick it up early, the prognosis, as seems to be reflected in this statement, is generally good.
Yes, I think the fact it was picked up as part of another procedure was fortuitous, and it may well be early stage. We're not totally sure about that. And so the fact it was picked up that way is a good sign, because if there were no symptoms associated with it, it might have been picked up a lot later for the King. So that in itself is a positive sign, but I think it's very hard to speculate exactly what sort of treatment he'll be having, and indeed what sort of cancer it is. It's been made clear we won't learn any more about that from the palace.
And the risk, we have to be very careful at the risk of speculation, but in terms of treatments generally for cancers, is there a regimen of things that people have to go through, which he will now have to go through like everybody else?
Well, speaking very generally, without any speculation about what form of treatment the King is having, cancer patients may well have chemotherapy, which can be debilitating and need a bit of time to recover from each bout of chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So those are fairly well-known treatments once a cancer has been diagnosed. So we can only speculate about what situation the King is in with regard to treatment. But yes, that sort of care will be offered to cancer patients. And the fact that he started it pretty quickly after the diagnosis is interesting.
Yeah. Just on that point, the King is a patron, as Hugh was saying, of several cancer patients. He will, over many, many years, have come face to face with people suffering from cancer, and clearly he has these causes he's very passionate about, and that perhaps does explain why this statement has come out now and in the form that it has.
Yeah, and I think they've been very clear about that, that he absolutely recognises, as does the Queen. I'm just looking at the reaction that's coming in all the time, as you'd imagine. Maggie's, we've heard about that, haven't we? This is where the Queen was opening a new centre at the Royal Free when she made, and I think Jenny picked out that when she was asked how the King was doing, she said he's doing his best, which people kind of felt was an interesting sort of reaction. But Maggie's Cancer Care Support Chief Executive Laura Lee, she said, "We're incredibly sorry to hear the King's news. Our thoughts are with him. We also know how challenging and worrying a time a cancer diagnosis can be for the whole family. And our thoughts are very much with our President, Her Majesty the King," adding that they've got cancer centres across the country for everyone living with cancer or impacted by this announcement. We've also got a statement from Macmillan Cancer Support. They said that everyone at the charity sends their best wishes. Our thoughts are with His Majesty the King and his family. The King has been a long-standing supporter of Macmillan. He became patron of the charity in 1997. So clearly there is a sense that there is a public health message behind this, not giving too much detail, but perhaps more detail than we've come to expect from senior members of the royal family. I should say, in terms of other reaction that's coming in, obviously all the time, just a reminder of what a global figure King Charles is. The US State Department, Vedant Patel, spokesman, described it as incredibly sad news. And I'm very sorry for the King and his family, and he told a briefing of reporters that the Biden administration's thoughts are with the King and the royal family.
Okay. Yeah, lots of politics reaction as well. We've been through the leaders and what they made of the announcement this afternoon. Let's just hear from the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle.
I wish to make a short statement. I know the whole House will wish to join me in expressing our sympathies with His Majesty the King following the news announcement this evening. Our thoughts are, of course, with His Majesty and his family, and with all wish to send him our very best wishes for the successful treatment and a speedy recovery following tonight's news.
Yeah, it's almost a reminder, that, Sarah, of the announcement we got as the late Queen was suffering and the shock that went around the House. This is obviously different circumstances and by no means as serious given what we've had from the palace. Talk to me about this sort of golden triangle of communication that goes on between the private secretary in the palace and number 10.
Well, we know that the Prime Minister was informed of the King's condition prior to the announcement. I mean, it's very big news, and we've known, haven't we, from today, it's very big news when any member of the royal family is impacted, and so there has to be a very close circle of those that need to know, and so there will have been a very carefully managed programme of how this news is going to be announced this evening, and done so in as careful a way as possible to try and not cause too much panic, too much speculation. The palace have made it very clear that they do not want people to try and speculate about the King's condition as much as possible, but they will try and give as much information as possible. But going forward, I think they've also made very clear that although the King, as you were hearing Mark Easton saying, he's not going to be out and about, he's not going to be taking part in public facing duties, but the sense is very much at the moment that he is still going to be carrying out his kingly duties, if you like. He's going to be reading those red boxes. He's going to be looking through the state papers. He's going to be continuing his weekly audience with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. And, you know, for as long as it is possible, it will be business as usual. We just won't see him as much. And so obviously that means for the royal family who are not incapacitated, because Catherine, the Princess of Wales, we know is, it means that they will be out and about, and they will be taking on duties on his behalf.
Mark Urban was helping us with some of those events. Mark Easton, I do beg your pardon. Mark Easton was helping us with some of those diary events which are in the pipeline. In terms of Canada, New Zealand and Australia,
yeah,
and the role that the royal family plays in those specific countries, how important are those trips to the royal household?
Well, it's symbolic, isn't it? But I think it's, although it hadn't been made official, I think it was probably likely that the King and the Queen were going to visit Canada this year, and Australia as well. Obviously they are monarch. The King is king here, but in the UK, but also of 14 other realms. And it is the case that their monarch, has not visited their country for about a decade, because the Queen, for a long time before she passed away in September 2022, did not undertake long-haul travel. So it would have been important to the King to have visited these countries in person, because
it would be important to say we don't know yet whether he's postponed, because they are somewhat down the line.
No, absolutely, absolutely not. So we'll have to see how these things pan out. But certainly that would have been on the schedule for this year, certainly. And so we'll have to see, you know, how that.
And the Commonwealth gathering, I think, is it in Samoa?
Chogham, this year. Again, Commonwealth, incredibly important to the King, as it was to Queen Elizabeth II. And so again, all of these things, the royal household will be doing all they can to make sure that the King can attend these events, can undertake these trips to Australia and to Canada. But it's not down to them, as we've been saying, you know, this evening, haven't we? This is the King is human after all, and if he's got to stay and be treated for cancer, then that is what must happen. So, you know, we know some detail, we don't know all detail.
Yeah, of course. His health is the most important thing at this time. Sarah's staying with me. We'll get plenty more reaction from her. But let's bring in George Cross, Research Fellow on the coronation and royal history at King's College. George, thank you for joining us. Coming as a real sadness for a lot of people around the country, those of us who enjoyed the coronation just 9 months ago, just 17 months on the throne. Reflect for us on what you've heard today and what you make of it.
Well, our thoughts and prayers obviously go to His Majesty and the royal family, and for as speedy as recovery as possible. I think it's as everybody I think has commented, it's shocking news, comes as a great surprise. I think what is striking is the way that the King, both with the prostate procedure and with this announcement, has been so open in his desire to not spread the news, but to set out very clearly the position as much as can be. A, that the show will go on, but B, I think there was that feeling after the statement on the prostate that he'd done so much good with that, with so many people following up. And I think there's a continuing feeling that's what's being done here as well, that the last bit of the statement, getting people to be checked up, is, I think, a really good thing. But it is a striking move. It's very open, much more unprecedented, really, in terms of how a monarch goes about sharing medical health news. But it's certainly a very shocking moment this evening on a rather bleak February evening.
Yeah, we've been speculating on that, the nature of the statement, what's in it, and how open they are about, okay, we don't know what cancer it is, but his treatment. I mean, in historical terms, that is certainly very different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a total change, sea change, if you want, from what may have happened in the past. I think it's partly because we have such a different media age, different news age, so you can't keep these things quiet. The monarch, the head of state, has so many meetings, so many appointments, that if they start missing them, it becomes very clear that something's going on. So you have to make a comment. But I think he really wants to to do good out of what is clearly a very worrying situation. And if the good is that people will go and be checked, and to make this part of everyday discussion, not his personal condition, but to make cancer something that people can talk about, then he's doing good by that. I think that's the effort here.
Just a note from the White House, President Biden has spoken. He says he is concerned about King Charles's diagnosis and intends to call him later. In historical terms, since we're talking about history, and given that we're talking about cancer, we're always told that we should get tested if there is cancer in the family. Is there cancer within the royal family, within the extended family, that might be pertinent here?
I don't think we can really necessarily draw that analogy, but I think it is this general sense of I need to tell people what's going on. I'm going to be an open monarch that reveals more than's ever been done before. We saw that in the coronation with the anointing. I want these things to be seen, and I want the public to know as much as I can. And I think that's the effort here. So I don't think by historical precedents, I mean, we know that George VI had lung cancer, but I think we can't. That's
obviously he was a very heavy smoker as well, wasn't he?
It's a very different
very different circumstances.
We know the king keeps himself.
But just in terms of his general duties, I mean, we know Queen Camilla was at Maggie's on Thursday at the London Free Hospital. There is clearly has been connection between this king and various cancer charities over the years.
Yeah, and this is definitely, again, clearly it's something that matters to him, that it's close to his heart. He wants to raise awareness as much as he can. I think earlier on in the programme, I think you mentioned about the extraordinary uptake in people getting checked up on prostate. That's an amazing thing to have done. So I think following that, there's this desire, okay, this is a very distressing situation, but let's do some good. It's also very clear that the show goes on. I think that's also why we saw those photos. He's not disappearing completely, and royal duties will carry on, but clearly for the treatment, some of the face-to-face things are just not going to be possible at this point. So it covers that as well. But clearly the show goes on, but it's trying to do good at the same time in what is a very difficult situation.
Yes, indeed so. The show always goes on. There is that stiff upper lip attitude, isn't there, within the royal household. George, thank you very much for that. Well, since we're talking about Maggie's, let's bring in Dame Laura Lee. She's the CEO at Maggie's Cancer Charity, which Queen Consort Camilla is president of, and she was there, as we were just saying, on Thursday. You're very welcome to the programme. Talk to me a little bit about that visit, if you would, because quite certainly the Queen would have known, Queen Camilla would have known the condition of the King while she was there.
Yes, it was a wonderful visit, and as part of that visit, the Queen sat with a group of Maggie's visitors, as she's done on many occasions, to hear about how they've been impacted by cancer and how the support that Maggie's has helped them and their families. So yes, here today we hear that she's had this news of the King's own diagnosis, and so she will have, she on that day continued to show her empathy and compassion for those affected by cancer, as she's done repeatedly for Maggie's over many years. And she knows firsthand how important it is to gather people round, to share the love and support of the family, how talking can make such a positive difference.
The Queen spoke on Thursday about the King's progress, saying he was getting on and doing his best, which Jenny Bond remarked at the top of the programme was a rather odd statement. But maybe you could talk about it in general terms. When people are diagnosed with cancer and they get the news for the first time, I guess it's difficult to overgeneralise, but what is the reaction that people go through?
So it's a bit like the reaction that we're all having today. So the news is shocking. It takes time to sort of absorb quite what the full impact of that is. What does this mean for me and my work and my family? And it's the ripple effect. It doesn't just affect the person the diagnosis has and the king, but it's his surrounding loved ones and family. So it takes time to just adjust as we're all adjusting to this news and what does it mean. But I know that he will have the best of medical care around him, and that he is surrounded by loving and family who will support him in the days ahead.
Can you talk to us about the way that this statement has been put out and the awareness that it instills in people out there? We were talking about prostate cancer and how many people went out and got checked over the last 2 weeks. Is it important for you as a cancer charity that the King has been so open about this?
It's so important, and we know that, and as the Queen has heard from our visitors, that being open and sharing your diagnosis with others helps take their own fear that they might be starting to have about what's really going on, why have we not heard anything, are there secrets? So his approach to being open and transparent is not only wonderful for us and those who love him around him, but yes, it gives that signal to anyone affected by cancer. Talk about it, get the help that you need, and that you'll benefit from being open about your diagnosis.
It occurs to me, Dame Laura, that I haven't properly explained what Maggie's does. I mean, for people who come to you, what help do they get?
So it's help right from the point of diagnosis, what to expect in my treatment, how to navigate the different tests, treatment options, making decisions, how to then navigate some of the side effects and the consequences of some of those side effects and treatments can have on my lifestyle, looking after my children, and then the emotional support, as well as some practical help with, I'm worried about how to navigate work and how to tell my employer, how to talk to my children. So all of those psychological and emotional, as well as some of the practical things that you need to think about when a diagnosis of cancer comes. That's what Maggie's does day in, day out. And I know the Queen very much in the last 15 years, who's visited almost all of our centres, knows firsthand and will, I hope, be drawing on her experience of many visitors that she's met.
Yeah, of course, cancer is no respecter of position. Everybody can suffer from cancer, and everybody, as you say, will have the shock of learning for the first time that they have cancer. It doesn't matter who you are. But in terms of the Queen, who's been so important to your charity, because we talk about the patients, but of course the family suffers as well. The sons will suffer, she will suffer. How do you think she will deal with it, knowing her as you do?
Well, she is someone who's got huge empathy and compassion. She's someone who also has a real sense of love and humour. And I know that she will be making sure that the King is loved and looked after, and the surrounding family, but also making sure that of keeping day-to-day life as normal. And
I get the sense she's a bit like my wife. So there'll be a certain amount of love and care, but also a little bit of get on with it.
A little bit of practicality.
Come on,
and
get on with it. Yes, I imagine so. Yeah. Just because there will be people tonight who have learned maybe in their last week that they're suffering from cancer or need treatment for cancer. What's your advice to them?
Well, just to take one's time to adjust to the news. It can feel shocking and overwhelming when your whole life has been turned upside down. But then very gradually, through coming to understand what's ahead, through getting support of people that you love around you and support from the likes of Maggie's, you can very gradually start to put your feet in front of you to see a path ahead, and that things may actually be much brighter and more optimistic than the initial point of the diagnosis can feel.
Dame Laura Lee, it's really good to talk to you. I've just been learning all about your charity online here in front of me. It's a good work that you do. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Pleasure. Thank
you very much indeed. Well, I think I just told you in the last few minutes that Joe Biden has been speaking, the Biden administration reacting to the news of King Charles's diagnosis. The US State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel expressing sadness to the news. Let's have a listen.
First and foremost, our thoughts are with the king. This is really with the king and his family. That's incredibly sad news, and very sorry for the king and his family.
Let's go to our correspondent Duncan Kennedy, who is in Windsor. I was just reflecting, actually, as we were listening to that, Duncan, that in fact the king was in the company of President Biden just last July.
That's right. They appeared to get on very well. No word at all, of course, of his current health situation back then. But this news has come through in the last hour or so and delivered quite a blow to a lot of people. We've had all that political reaction, medical reaction you've been getting there, Christian. And just on a very personal level, we've had people here in Windsor, a mixture of tourists and a mixture of local people, giving their reactions too. And I think you can sum up the word with one word: shock. We've been revealing the news to the people. They hadn't heard it themselves. A lot of them have been tourists. We spoke to 4 men from India, part of the Commonwealth, of course, and they said they were shocked to hear the news. We spoke to 2 couples from Glasgow who are here in Windsor to see the sights, including the castle here behind me, and all 4 of them gasped when we told them the news tonight, and they said they were deeply shocked by the news. Another chap from Singapore said he wished the king well, and a third chap said he hadn't heard the news. We had told him the news, but he said he felt sorry for King Charles and he wished him well in the future. So a combination of reactions here. It's always the same when you mention the word cancer. People take it in this way. People tend to be shocked by it, and that's certainly the reaction here in Windsor. And it rather contrasts with the tone, if you like, of the Buckingham Palace statement released just over an hour ago, when they spoke of King Charles being totally positive about what was going on and looking forward to returning to full public duties as soon as possible. So the tone from the Buckingham Palace somewhat in contrast to that being issued here by the people that are walking around the streets of Windsor here tonight. And of course, also here in Windsor tonight are the Prince and Princess of Wales. They're in Adelaide Cottage, which is in the grounds of Windsor Castle over my shoulder here. Almost certainly, no doubt, they are being keeping fully informed of what's going on with King Charles. Of course, the Princess of Wales herself, recuperating from her own abdominal surgery that took place in the same hospital that King Charles got his prostate diagnosis last week. 1 or 2 people have asked us why Buckingham Palace haven't told us what type of cancer the king has got, given that last week they were giving more information about why he was in hospital. And of course we weren't able to answer that, and Buckingham Palace are almost certainly not going to entertain any kind of speculation on that. They won't be giving what they call in the press a running commentary on these things. So for now we remain unenlightened about what type of cancer it is. But certainly, so far as the public is concerned, a degree of shock, matching that coming from political and other leaders around the world tonight.
I'm always struck when I visit Windsor, Duncan. I don't live too far away, and sometimes we go up there for weekends, just what a central focal point of the town the palace is. There is a very distinct connection between the community in Windsor and the royal family. So if any town around the country that is really feeling this tonight, it will be Windsor.
Very much so. I mean, the castle, the royal family, is the epicentre for literally millions of people. It is one of the most popular spots for tourists when they come to the UK. We've not only got the castle here behind us, there's the Long Walk, other royal residences around the place. Of course, it was where the Queen enjoyed much of her final days and enjoyed staying here for weekends, away from Buckingham Palace, away from London, and it's become the home, albeit not the castle itself, of the Prince and Princess of Wales. so very much at the epicentre of royal life. There's speculation that the Prince and Princess of Wales may one day move into the castle itself. And it is a place that King Charles himself has also visited on many occasions, of course. It is a place that they find comfortable, away from the spotlight of London. They can ride here, they can do all sorts of things here. But yes, the town itself does have a great affinity to all things royal. And when you speak to them like we have this evening and reveal this news to them, you can understand why they react like that. Not least because the king has only been in post, if you like, since the coronation for 9 months. They anticipated, like his mother, that he will be around for many, many years. And one of them I spoke to said he hopes that he will be around for many years to come, especially without any knowledge of exactly what this cancer is at the moment. People do really feel it here. Lots of gift shops, lots of souvenir shops. It's a very royal town itself. It's why people come here. And it's why I think people here were genuinely shocked when we spoke to them this evening to reveal this news. As I say, not all of them were from Windsor, but it draws people here. And when you mention that word cancer, people do get taken aback by it. Of course, 1 or 2 of them said to us that the king is 75 years old, and 1 in 3 men over the age of 50 do have issues with prostate. But as it's not prostate, all those statistics go out the window, and those people just remain taken aback, I think is the word we would use here, and express their sympathies, and 1 or 2 of them saying they really hope that the king gets well very, very quickly. Of course, no details about that from Buckingham Palace. All we have from them is that his treatment started today.
Yes, and we wish him well with that. Duncan, thank you very much for that. Let's bring in the royal commentator, Caroline Aston. Caroline, now, as Duncan was talking there about his royal duties, has there been a marked increase in the number of duties the king has been covering over these past 17 months? Has he had a busier workload of late, which might have impacted on his health?
Well, he's certainly left me quite breathless. And he's been a great carrier of his mother's idea that we, i.e. royalty, has to be seen to be believed. He's been out there showing himself to his people. And I think that's exactly what he was doing on the trip to church at Sandringham. That was very cleverly managed, the optics of that. There he was among his people, going to church, smiling, looking, I thought, quite well. And then we have this shock news. So he's been a very, very busy man. And, you know, we can't forget his age. He's going to be, 76 this year on November the 14th. And, of course, many cancer diagnoses, there's quite a big proportion of them, are for men over 75. And, of course, it's also worth saying, we talk about cancer, but the trouble with cancer is it's a terrifying word, and it's not one disease. It's many different diseases that come under that heading, a form of cancer, a type of cancer. At the moment, non-specific. My heart goes out to Queen Camilla and to her husband, and of course to all those people throughout this country who today will also have had this diagnosis. And of course beyond these shores, messages are coming in from all over the world. And of course we are blessed in this country that we have such superb cancer treatment available. And I'm sure I join in wishing the royal family, in particular the king and his wife, the very best going forward in what will be a grueling time, handled, I'm sure, with great courage.
Absolutely. In terms of his character, you've covered him for a long time. He's been, as Nicholas Witchell was saying, a very fit man. There's been the odd bump and scrape along the way. Jenny Bond was saying that at times, though, he can be brooding. And I wonder, as we extend our sympathies to him, how we might in private be dealing with the shock news that he's been given.
How would any of us deal with it? But of course, you're right. He is a deep thinker. He used to love the works of Lawrence van der Post. He's a spiritual man. He has great concerns about the great concerns in the world. So deep inside him, he will be fighting the battle that all those people, given this diagnosis, have to fight. The first response is, of course, shock. I'm sure he will also have felt relief that because of a procedure that was for something bizarre, benign, something far more threatening has been discovered. There are patches of light in here, and as other commentators have said, the fact that his son, Prince Harry, is going to come and see him here at last is quite a big olive branch under recent circumstances. So in this time of difficulty and fear, there are these moments of light. But make no mistake, the king will know exactly what he's going to face. He will have gone through a treatment plan with his specialists. And I'm sure with his attitude to going forward and carrying on, he will face up to this and we hope come through well.
Because as you may mention, he will continue to do his boxes. The boxes and the matters of state, which he will sign and read and get involved with day to day, is something that is done out of sight and out of mind, for quite separate to his public roles. How much of his day does that take up, and how much interest does he take in it?
It takes as long as the amount of material in the boxes is. I think the royal red boxes run like a scarlet thread through the history of the monarchy. Her Majesty the Queen was most diligent in doing hers. And indeed, looking at this whole situation, the history of the royal family and illness and how they go forward. What struck me about this is the openness of this, as several other commentators have said. We can all remember, I'm sure, flickering footage of those discreet statements that were posted on the gates of Buckingham Palace that never quite said what was wrong, but intimated that the monarch was undergoing a certain procedure or was not too well. It's the openness of this, and I'm sure that this will be an inspiration to many people. As for his ability to work, I'm sure what he's able to do physically, he will continue to do. But of course, it's early days. He started treatment, but as time goes on, his way of doing his work, the way his work is presented to him, and his future jobs will all be tailored according to his levels of energy. I would like to say this. For me, one of the outstanding moments in my memory of his coronation back in May was that moment, that most sacred moment when he was anointed and they placed screens around him and he knelt there and he looked such a vulnerable older man. As many have said, he holds the record for the longest ever wait to be monarch. He has big shoes to fill, but he is a man of courage, of strength, and a man of insight into his own people. He will be aware that people will worry about him, and he's done his best, in my opinion, so far, to allay fear and worry and to say, I'm going to go forward. Buckingham Palace, that great symbol, I will be there. I will carry on forward. I will be your king.
Caroline Aston, good of you to join us this evening. It's good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much for being with us. Sarah's still with me in the studio and looking at some of the reaction coming in from around the world, specifically from Canada.
Yeah, indeed. Of course, a Commonwealth country, so the King is head of state there, and the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, of course, knows the King very well. I, like Canadians across the country and people around the world, am thinking of His Majesty King Charles III as he undergoes treatment for cancer. We are sending him our very best wishes and hoping for a fast and full recovery. Just a little bit more reaction. I think there's a real theme from the medical profession. So Dr. Jay Verma, who's the president of the GP section at the Royal Society of Medicine, he wishing His Majesty a speedy recovery, but also that theme that's coming through, we'd also like to thank His Majesty for using his unique position in highlighting how cancer is indiscriminate in who it affects, and there should be no shame or embarrassment in coming forward to seek health and advice. Lots of members of the medical profession, we've heard some cancer charities saying a very similar thing. That
particularly important among men. Men don't talk about their illnesses and cancers and how they feel and what they're going through, and the fact that the King is leading by example here is quite important.
Absolutely, and you've already referred to the number of men who went forward to have their prostates checked, to get them tested, and again the King was very well aware of the difference that had made. And that is undoubtedly why. Yeah,
because they've picked this up as through the course of this. It was benign, the treatment that he had for prostate, but you would imagine they picked up a PSA number or something like that, and through the course of that treatment, lo and behold, they picked something else up, and hopefully they've caught it early enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, indeed so. Right. Well, let's bring in Sarah Griswood, royal author. We've been talking, Sarah, tonight about the pressure this is going to put on the other members of the royal family. We have sympathy, of course, for Prince William, the Prince of Wales at the moment, who's looking after his wife, who's convalescing. But the Princess Royal, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will step up. It's a reminder, though, that those who've been lost to the family in frontline duties, thinking, of course, of the man in our screen, Prince Harry, and the Duke of York, how sorely they're missed at a time of testing like this.
Well, absolutely. We always knew that King Charles would want to slim down the monarchy, but there has been such an enforced slimming down even before this burst of ill health. And what's noticeable in many ways is how many of those stepping up are going to be women. Other than Prince William, it is, of course, and the Duke of Edinburgh, but it is Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, the Princess of Wales when she's well enough again, Sophie. It's going to be almost an interesting return to a slightly feminised royal family that we'll be seeing out and about on the streets and the screens.
We've talked about the calendar ahead, and we've just been picking up the news from Justin Trudeau of Canada and the best wishes he's extended. But there is a royal visit pending to Canada and also to Australia and New Zealand. And Sarah, who's with me here in the studio, was remarking just how important that will be to the King and the way he is seen within his realm.
Yes, that is indeed a genuine problem, because as we all know, in other parts of the Commonwealth, other parts of the world were deeply devoted to Queen Elizabeth II. There was some uncertainty over how welcoming they would be to a King Charles. Everything had seemed to be going very smoothly, but the fact that it may for quite some time be unadvisable for him to make long journeys is a real blow. No pretending it isn't.
And in terms of the way the Queen Consort will deal with this, I mean, we just heard from Maggie's about the visit on Thursday. She did speak about the King, but clearly she also now has dual responsibilities. She's looking after the King at a time of his need, but also trying to fulfil some of the duties he would have assumed.
Yes, and let's remember how short a time she's been in any very visible royal role. She really has come an extraordinarily rapid, long journey already, and now she has another one to go.
What about the duties that he's been taking on over the last year? I think Sarah was just looking at the figures, and we've just been looking at how much busier he has been of late. As a 75-year-old man, I think up from sort of 400, the late 400 visits to over 500 in a year. That's an enormous workload for a man. He's not an elderly man, far from it, but a man getting on in years.
No, I think we can see there his huge enthusiasm, as it were, for the role, and his determination to really make something of his kingship. It's very, very hard luck, you might say, that so early in his reign he's being forced to cut back. But who knows? I'm really being Pollyanna here, looking on the bright side. But it does now seem as if Prince Harry is coming to visit, as we've said. Perhaps it might have taken something cataclysmic to bring about the reconciliation there. This may be it. But also, I think the reign of King Charles from the start, he was very determined to try and slightly remodel the monarchy as had to be done for the 21st century. Well, now, if you like, there's almost a kind of crash course in different ways of doing things, different members of the family stepping up to help the sovereign.
And do you see that? Do you see that in the statement that we've been issued tonight, and how open they've been about his treatment and what he's suffering from?
I think the openness is definitely very new. I think it is another way of this king, being determined to model the monarchy as has always needed to happen, in line with the present times. Because once upon a time, no, any sign of human vulnerability was kept firmly behind palace doors. But of course, the rules were once different from everybody. When this king's grandfather, George VI, was very dangerously ill, he himself wasn't told just what he had and just what the probable outcomes were, because that was the norm then. But happily, times have changed, and clearly King Charles is very determined to change with them.
Yeah. As we've been doing through the course of the evening, we wish him the best with his treatment. Sarah Griswold, good to talk to you. Thank you for that. Sarah Campbell is with me in the studio. I was just thinking as I was listening to Sarah about Prince William. I mean, if my dad had just been told he'd been diagnosed with cancer, I'd be beside myself with worry. And he's already dealing with his wife, who's convalescing from what we understand was quite a serious procedure just a few weeks ago. So he's going through it.
It's a lot to take on, and he's got 3 young children who, also need his support and his reassurance. Our understanding is that the rest of the family are going to step up, and it was announced earlier today that Prince William was going to resume royal engagements on Wednesday, with his first sort of engagement since Catherine was discharged from hospital last week. So we'll have to see, but one would imagine that Prince William is going to have to step up, and you're absolutely right. It's difficult. But this is what the royal family do, isn't it? Is that whatever's going on privately, publicly, the job goes on.
I'm at pains to say, as I have been all night, that there will be a lot of people watching us who are also going through this. Yeah. And that is the point, actually. And that's why the King has put this statement out. He wants us to be talking about it. He wants us to be raising awareness. And he wants people to know that he's going through the same thing that they are, and that's an important point to make. The importance for us telling this story is, of course, because he has a separate role, and that is he is the head of state. And so over the last few days and weeks, there will have been an enormous number of conversations going on in the background about what goes on in the short term and perhaps in the medium term.
There will have been those conversations going on, and I think all the guidance that we've had, certainly this evening, is this feeling that we're in the very early days. We don't know the full situation. We know the cancer. We don't know which cancer diagnosis it is. We know that the King is determined to carry on with his duties. So I think the feeling at the moment is steady the ship. He will be carrying on what he's doing whilst he's having the treatment at the same time. And in the meantime, expect to see the Princess Royal, expect to see Queen Camilla, expect to see Prince William out and about doing the duties that the King otherwise would be doing. And that's the sense that we have to go with this evening until we know any more.
Yeah, no need for panic, no need for alarm. Sympathy, yes, but keep on doing, as is the motto of the royal family.
Yeah, and very clearly the palace are guiding that the councillors of state haven't been actioned. So councillors of state, as we know, are those senior members of the royal family who would be drafted in to carry on if the King was unable to carry on, and that isn't happening. And so, the King is still in charge.
That said, he's waited decades to be the King. Just 17 months after assuming the throne, 9 months after his coronation, and here we are. It's bad luck, isn't it?
Well, health is health, isn't it? It doesn't matter who you are. I think this is,
you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
And that's what a lot of the statements are saying. This can happen to anyone. And the positive, if we can take it from the moment, is that perhaps people who had thought about having a check last week maybe will go and have a check this week.
Rotten luck, but as the statement says very clearly, the medical team are involved, swift intervention, early tests, hopefully early diagnosis, and as we know with cancer, when there's an early diagnosis, the prognosis tends to be generally good, so we will cross fingers and certainly wish him the best. In terms of the general response around the world, it's still a reminder, isn't it, that the royal family does capture the attention of the world, and people are interested. Statements from President Biden, statements from Donald Trump, statements from world leaders. It counts.
You know that this news will be on the front pages across the world. Yes, in Commonwealth countries where the King is the head of state, so Australia, New Zealand, Canada and others, but it will be on the front pages of many other countries because the royal family in the UK is known around the world, and the King is very much has been a global figure for decades, as his mother was. And so yes, this will absolutely be making the news.
Mark Easton was making the point that he's chosen to announce this at Buckingham Palace and the Royal Standard is there, so that's where you would expect the King to be. But where do you think he will convalesce?
Well, that is a good question, isn't it? So there were questions when the King, whether he would live in Buckingham Palace. He is for part of the week. He's also spending time in Windsor. There were some questions. Obviously, Windsor was very close to the Queen's heart, Queen Elizabeth II's heart. But there were questions as to whether the King would want to spend as much time there. It would appear that he is spending weekends, and of course that has a huge advantage because his three of his grandchildren are within the grounds of Windsor Castle, the shadow of Windsor Castle, so it allows him to spend a lot of time with the family at weekends. We know he was in Sandringham yesterday because we saw the pictures of him waving as he was making his way to St Mary Magdalene Church. So we don't know exactly where he's going to choose to convalesce. He has some options, so we'll wait and see. Obviously, what we do know is that he will have the best medical treatment it's possible to have.
Sarah Campbell, thank you. Live from London, this is BBC News. King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. Buckingham Palace says he will continue with state duties, but step back from public engagements during his treatment. The palace says the cancer was identified during the King's recent trip to hospital for an enlarged prostate, but haven't said what type of cancer it is. Prince Harry has spoken to his father and will travel back to the UK in the coming days. Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. If you're just joining us, welcome to our continuing coverage this evening of the breaking story from Buckingham Palace, a statement that has announced the King is being treated for cancer. He will continue with state duties, but will step back from public engagements during his treatment. The statement says that during the King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he has been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. The King is grateful to his medical team, says the statement, for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. Goes on to say that His Majesty has chosen to share this diagnosis to prevent speculation and in the hope that it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. A spokesperson for the King has not revealed what type of cancer he has, but they say it is not prostate cancer. Last week, the King was discharged from hospital following surgery for an enlarged prostate, a condition the palace had described as benign. King Charles was last pictured yesterday at the Sunday service at the Church of St Mary Magdalene on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. It was his first public outing since his 3-night hospital stay just a week ago. There have, of course, been responses from all around the world and from Westminster. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said, "I'm wishing His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. I have no doubt he will be back to full strength in no time, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well." The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said, "On behalf of the Labour Party, I wish His Majesty all the very best for his recovery. We look forward to seeing him back to swift, full health." The new Northern Ireland First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, said, "I'm very sorry to hear of King Charles's illness, and I want to wish him well for his treatment and a full and speedy recovery." The leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, has also added his best wishes. He says that he hopes the King, a full and speedy recovery to the King. The Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford said, "I'm saddened to hear the news that King Charles III is facing further health challenges. My thoughts and those of people across Wales will be with him and his family this evening. I send my very best wishes," he adds, as he starts treatment for a full and swift recovery. In the past few minutes, the Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf has been giving his reaction to the King's cancer diagnosis.
Can I send my thoughts and indeed my prayers to His Majesty the King and wish him well for a full recovery and a return back to public life. And let me also send my very best wishes and my thoughts with Her Majesty the Queen and all the members of the royal family who will be deeply worried at this time. I don't think it matters whether you're a member of the royal family or not. If a family member has cancer, that is always going to be extremely worrying indeed. So I want to send them my very best wishes, not just on behalf of myself personally, the government I lead, but in terms on behalf of the entire nation.
Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf giving us his reaction in the last few minutes. With me in the studio is our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell. There will be people joining us who are just coming to the news at this hour, Sarah. So let me recap on the tone of the statement. There is a note of optimism in here.
There is a note of optimism. The King is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention. Of course, we know that he was admitted to hospital about 10 days ago now for treatment, corrective treatment to an enlarged prostate. Obviously, something was discovered during that procedure. So grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, and he remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. Also, that His Majesty has chosen to share his diagnosis, A, to prevent speculation, but also in the hope it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who've been affected by cancer. And we've seen that, haven't we, with all the comments from cancer charities, Maggie's Cancer Care, cancer charities that both he and the Queen are involved with as royal patrons, really appreciating the fact that whilst sending their best wishes, that this has been put front and centre on people's radar, which, you know, when anything happens to a member of the royal family, that is the result, that is exactly what happens. Obviously, we're talking about him as king and how this will affect his role as king, but he's also, isn't he, he's a father, he's a grandfather, he is a husband. We know that Prince Harry, he told both of his sons in person about his diagnosis, or via person. And the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, is making his way, or will be making his way back to the UK in the coming days. Of course, I don't need to explain to you, there have been issues over the last few years, family issues, but when something like this happens, lots of those issues get forgotten, don't they? So we'll see how that happens. And it will be, as we've been talking about, as well as a mental strain on the rest of his family because of this diagnosis. There is a practical issue in that they will have to step up and perform duties that the King otherwise would have done. So we have Prince William, his eldest son, who's already dealing with Catherine, Princess of Wales, who was admitted to hospital for abdominal surgery. She was released last week. She's due to convalesce for at least the next few weeks. But he is going to have to go on and carry the ship now, along with Queen Camilla, who's 76 years old, who's already, over the last year, already seen a rise in the number of engagements she's carrying out. She is going to have to do more, the Princess Royal as well, and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. So this impacts the family in an emotional way, but also simply upping their workload.
Yeah, I think irrespective of the position he holds and the title he has, most people, I would think all people, have empathy for anybody who learns that they have just been diagnosed with cancer. It's an enormous shock to learn of that, and everybody recognises that when you're told that news, there's a long, long road ahead of you, whatever type of cancer it is. And so whatever his duties are, the priority over the coming weeks and months will be the King's health and ensuring that he gets the right treatment.
Absolutely, and we don't know what that treatment is. We don't know the specifics of what the cancer is. We know that the King returned from Sandringham to London this morning to start his treatment as an outpatient. We know that he's staying at home in London this evening. Like I say, we don't know the actual details of the treatment he's going to be undergoing, but anybody that's had a cancer diagnosis will know that that sort of treatment can be quite difficult. We're not going to speculate on how difficult, but
I think what's crucially important, and it's already come to light in the last 2 hours, is just how important it is for everyone out there to go and get tested. Here is a man who went to hospital with perhaps a concern about an enlarged prostate on the advice of his doctors, and lo and behold, there is something else that needs treatment, but you don't know if you don't go and get tested. And so the lesson to all of us is go and get tested and find out.
Yeah, and in the very much on the record guidance from the palace, it's made very clear the king elected to make his diagnosis public once the schedule of treatment had begun, because as Prince of Wales, before he was king, he was patron of a number of cancer-related charities. And in this capacity, the guidance says His Majesty has often spoke publicly in support of cancer patients, their loved ones, and the health professionals who help to care for them. So this is very much the thinking, because we've been speaking, haven't we, for the last couple of hours about this is relatively unusual in the years that I've been covering the royal family, particularly with Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth II. We were aware that they weren't well because they didn't turn up to engagements. We were very rarely told any specific details, and indeed we weren't told much in advance when they hadn't, before in advance when they didn't turn up to the engagements, because for a very understandable reason is that their life is very public, and in a sense the one thing that they're able to keep to themselves is their health, to keep that private, and that is their right absolutely to do so. But the king has obviously taken this decision that for the greater good, actually sharing this diagnosis is a positive thing to do.
Okay, I know you're going to stay with me and react to some of the news as it comes in this evening. Let's go to Windsor, to the castle. Duncan Kennedy is standing outside the gates there, and we were remarking in the last hour, Duncan, just what a blow this will be to the community in Windsor, as closely attached as it is to the royal family.
That's very much the case, Christian. Just ordinary folk, ordinary people reacting to this news tonight, not just presidents, not just other politicians, but just ordinary subjects of King Charles. We were speaking to groups of people here, a lot of tourists here, some local people out walking their dogs tonight. And we spoke to a group of guys from India. They're here on holiday, and they used the word shocked. And I think that's the word that most people are using with us tonight. We spoke to two couples from Glasgow who were staying in a B&B round the corner here, and we told them the news. They hadn't been following the news because they're here on a break, and they literally gasped, all of them, the man and the woman and the other man and the woman, and they said that they couldn't believe it. They too were shocked by this news coming from Buckingham Palace. Spoke to another chap from Singapore here on holiday as well. He said he wished the king well, and another chap we spoke to said he was sorry to hear the news, and he also wished the king well. What we haven't had here out of Windsor, of course, is any reaction from the Prince and Princess of Wales, who stay in the grounds, if you like, of Windsor Castle here behind me, at a place called Adelaide Cottage. That's their home, where they live with their 3 children. And it's understandable that there hasn't been any reaction from them, because the Princess of Wales herself is recuperating from her own abdominal surgery that she had a couple of weeks ago, and it's very much in keeping that the royal family don't comment in detail about these things. I think it's a case that what we've had from Buckingham Palace will remain it for now. They're not going to be speculating about anything in terms of the king's treatment, other than saying that it has now begun. 1 or 2 people we did speak to here tonight asked me what kind of cancer it was. Because Buckingham Palace haven't said anything about that, I was unable to pass any of that news on. But I think people will be curious about that. I think they felt that, having had all that information about the king going to hospital last week, they felt perhaps that Buckingham Palace was going to give us more information about the king's health. But although they have issued this pretty comprehensive statement this evening, we're not likely to get any more details, including the type of cancer that the king now has.
Yeah, I mean, we were just saying earlier in the evening, Duncan, that he is a relatively fit man. He's in good shape for a man of his age. he has a certain physical resilience. Yes, there have been the odd incident along the way, particularly when he played polo. But in that sense, the prognosis must be fairly good, that as it is for all younger men who are diagnosed with cancer, that there is a very strong chance that he will get over this.
Yes, potentially. We're simply unaware of the facts, Christian. That's the problem with all of this. Cancer is a serious matter. I've heard many of your guests this evening speak about that, and it undoubtedly is. It all depends on what stage it's at. If they've got whatever cancer this is at an early stage, then yes, the diagnosis, the prognosis could be very positive indeed. If it's at a later stage, well, then other calculations come into play. We simply don't know what type of cancer it is, whether it's amenable to treatment. They said his treatment has started today, but they're not giving us any details about what that treatment is. On his wider health, you're quite right. We saw him yesterday at Sandringham, waving and smiling to people as he went to church, walking in with Queen Camilla there. He's a very robust health for a man of 75. He obviously has a lot of duties, a lot of engagements that keep him very active. And we're told in this Buckingham Palace statement tonight that he'll continue to look at his papers. Obviously, being the head of state, he has many red box papers that he has to get through. So his health is not of such a state that he can't devote himself to those mental activities, if you like. But there will be obviously some physical implications of all this, but those the palace have chosen not to go into. What we do know tonight is that large sections of the public, at least judging by those people here in Windsor, they're shocked for what's happened, but very many of them are wishing the very best for the King and a speedy recovery.
We've had some reaction from Washington tonight, Duncan. President Biden said he was concerned about King Charles's diagnosis, and by all accounts will be calling him later to talk to him directly. One of the set-piece events that we remember there at Windsor was, in fact, President Biden's visit there in July, and so there seems to be a connection between these two heads of state.
Yes, that's right. There was a connection. Obviously, the president couldn't make it to the coronation itself 9 months ago, but did pay him that visit. And the two men seemed to connect, both extremely experienced, worldly wise men who no doubt have a lot of history and a lot of subject matters in common with each other, not least the fact that Britain and the United States have close relations anyway. These two men are well experienced on the world stage and will have had a lot to talk about. It's no wonder that people like President Biden have reacted tonight, just one of many people around the world reacting to this news. King Charles is a very prominent figure, obviously second only to his late mother. He will be well known all around the world, and people will have been shocked by this news, and people make these statements when they hear this news from other heads of state. They put in these calls, they put out these statements expressing their wishes for these people to get better. We obviously also heard from, or had a statement via secondary sources from Prince Harry that he has also spoken to his father, and he too will be heading to the United Kingdom in the coming days, as it's been put, no doubt to visit him at close quarters. He hasn't been here for several months. He too will want to see his father as well. So yes, all kinds of reaction from around the world. This upbeat, toned statement from Buckingham Palace saying the King remains totally positive, and that's kind of the message coming from all kinds of other people, whether it's world leaders or simply people walking around the streets here of Windsor as well, wishing the King all the best for the future.
Absolutely. Duncan Kennedy, thank you very much for that. Well, since we're talking about reaction from Washington, let's just have a listen to the reaction at the US State Department. Here's the Deputy Spokesperson, Vedant Patel.
First and foremost, our thoughts are with the King. This is really with the King and his family. That's incredibly sad news, and very sorry for the King and his family.
And as I mentioned, there has been some reaction from the President himself. This is what he said just a few minutes ago.
Do you have a message for King Charles? Message for King Charles.
Glad to call. I'm concerned about him. Just heard his diagnosis, but I'll be talking to him, God willing.
And what's next on the border bill?
Border bill, sir. What's next?
Folks, you got him for hopefully passage in the Senate.
How?
There are enough votes.
That was her asking that.
We're working the room today.
Reaction from President Biden in the last hour or so. Sarah Campbell is with me in the studio. We're going to talk about the cancer side of it in a minute with Fergus Walsh, who's joining us. But just in terms of the year ahead and how this will complicate the calendar for the King.
Well, we don't know is the simple answer to that. I mean, obviously the treatment will take as long as it takes. We know that they are hoping that he will continue doing his red boxes, doing the sort of the things that he can do without having to undertake any sort of strenuous activity, if you like, sort of the public-facing duties, although he is going to be seeing the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Those weekly meetings are going to continue, Privy Council meetings will continue, so all of that will continue. I think sort of the big question is, I think this year was very much the year for him to, if last year was building on being king in the UK, if you like, I think this year was about travel. It was about the Commonwealth. It was about Commonwealth countries, of which, of course, he is head of state. So it was about visits to Canada, potentially. Nothing had been confirmed, but it was very much talked about, visits to Canada and Australia, because you remember that the Queen Elizabeth II, for at least the last 10 years before she died, undertook no long-haul travel. So for those countries, they haven't actually had their head of state in their country for a very long time. So I think that was very much a priority for the King to go and visit these countries. I was with him back in 2022 when he and, at that point, the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, went to Canada. And they had travelled halfway across the country in about 3 days. It was extraordinary, the workload, the level, but it was really important for them both to go out and meet as many people as possible and to really sort of put their stamp on being in Canada, being in a Commonwealth country, and the people that I spoke to really appreciated that.
He's well informed. I mean, he will be sensitive to the questions that are being asked, as we well know, in Australia and also within CHOGM. Yeah,
absolutely, hugely. There are very contentious issues at the moment. And one of the things I think he has done is really tackle these things, head on. He has tackled contentious issues when he's been to these countries, and I'm sure that is something that he would have wanted to do. I mean, the Queen Elizabeth II always said, she had to be seen to be believed almost. I think the same with the King, is that these countries want him to go there. We don't obviously know how long this treatment is going to take. We're not able to say at this point that he won't be able to visit Australia this year, that he won't be able to visit Canada, that he won't be able to go to CHOGM, which is in October. The treatment may well have finished by then, so absolutely no problem. But certainly at the moment, there are questions because we simply don't know about the prognosis.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. Let's talk about the medical side of things, shall we? Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, is in our London newsroom. It's difficult, Fergus, to talk specifically about this because, of course, we don't know what type of cancer it is. But putting things together from the events of the last 3 weeks, what do you see?
As you say, the palace really don't want speculation on even what type of cancer this is, let alone what stage, how early it was caught. We know it's not prostate cancer, but that it was picked up through diagnostic tests as a result of the King's recent treatment for benign enlarged prostate. And so we know the palace has said that he began his regular sessions of cancer, what will become regular sessions of treatment for cancer today, and that these will be done as an outpatient. Now, the King joins there. 1,000 people a day in the UK are diagnosed with cancer, and most cancer treatment now is given as outpatients, but that covers a huge variety of different treatments, most commonly things like chemotherapy, drug treatments to try and shrink down cancers, but chemotherapy comes in a vast many different forms, including infusions into the arm, the most common way, but also oral tablets, and even in some cases injections direct into the affected organ affected by cancer. Then there's also radiotherapy. Now, all these treatments come with potential side effects, but because we don't know, we've not been told what type of cancer, we can't speculate on those. But age is the number one risk factor for most cancers. The King is 75, and just over a third of all new cancers are diagnosed in people aged 75 and over.
perhaps the most important public service we can extend tonight, Fergus, and the one that certainly the King would want us to extend is to urge people to go and get tested. And here is a very good example through our head of state of, what you can avoid, we hope, what can be avoided if you go and get tested and you can catch these things early.
Yes, and that was very much the reason why the treatment for his prostate was announced, that he wanted men to go and get checked to see if they had any problems with their prostate, such a common condition. And it's as a result of treatments for one part of the body that you then may pick up something else. And the King has been praised by the Royal College of Physicians tonight, saying that it's further proof that cancer is indiscriminate, can affect anybody, and to raise awareness of it, encourage people, if they have any doubts, they have a lump or a bump or something that they're worried about, they should always go and get it checked out.
We talked tonight about his age. He turned 75 in November, Fergus, but also how fit he is. And for a man of his age, he's been in pretty good health through his life, apart from the odd bump and scrape here and there. Does that tend to help with prognosis going forward?
Well, it certainly can do. Doctors who are treating any condition will start by saying they want their patients, they hope the patients have a good overall level of fitness. But there's a limit to what you can say about this, since we don't even know what part of the King's body is affected by cancer, and the palace don't want speculation, so it's really hard to say. But yes, doctors would definitely say to you that the fitter their patients are, usually the better the outcomes are.
Fergus Walsh, thank you very much indeed for that. We are shortly going to say goodbye to our viewers on PBS who are watching us around the world. But before we do that, and for people who are just joining, let me quickly recap the statement that we have had from Buckingham Palace this evening, in which they confirmed that the King is suffering from a cancer. We don't know, as Fergus was saying, which type of cancer it is, but subsequent diagnostic tests, they said, have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he has been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork, the paperwork he gets through his red boxes each day, as usual. He says that he is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure, those tests that he underwent, and he remains wholly positive about his treatment, looking forward to returning, he said, to full public duty as soon as possible. He has chosen, he said, to share his diagnosis to prevent speculation and to assist public understanding. We will say goodbye to our viewers on PBS News. But for our other viewers who remain with us, Sarah Campbell is here in the studio. Prince Harry, we've not talked much about him. He is coming back. He's got public duties of his own, the other side of that. What do you make of what you've heard tonight?
Yes, so the palace have guided that all the King's siblings and children, of course he has Prince William and Prince Harry, were notified personally by His Majesty. And we understand from Harry's side, of course, we know that Harry and his wife, Meghan, and their 2 children live in Montecito in California. That Harry is, has cleared his schedules and he will be coming back to the UK. It's been well documented that there have been many issues over the last few years in the relationship between Prince Harry and the rest of his family, his brother and his father. I don't think there's no doubt that it has been extremely difficult, but I think, as we know, when there are health issues, perhaps difficulties get put aside.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? That there's a lot in the public domain about the relationship, some of which, maybe a large part of it may be true, I don't know. But there's no doubt the King loves his son, and I'm sure the son loves his dad. And it's moments like this when you find out just how much, actually, and the fact that he's coming quite quickly to see him perhaps does speak volumes about the relationship.
Yeah, and I mean, it must be said that most of the information that's been put in the public domain has been put in the public domain by Prince Harry. We haven't heard really from Buckingham Palace. They have kept really not said anything about the issues, and although it's talked about online, on social media, almost all day, every day, we really don't know other than what Prince Harry has said. But I think this news that Prince Harry is dropping everything, that he will be coming across to the UK, people who've been watching the royal family will certainly be hoping that this perhaps will lead to a thaw in relations. As I say, it's difficult times that bring families together, isn't it?
Well, you don't often see that moment of tenderness within the royal family, but you did see it from Prince William, Prince of Wales at the coronation. Just that moment when he brought the orb to his father. I think it was the orb that he brought to his father. But there was just that moment which talks about the relationship between them. And I think, we've talked tonight about his status and the title he has, but I think a lot of people will have empathy with the family tonight because they will know, people who've had cancer within their families will know what a shock it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we're talking about family relations, we have to talk about Queen Camilla as well. It was striking. I think when I've watched members of the royal family go into hospital in previous years, quite often they haven't had any visitors from members of the family, but the Queen, when he was having his procedure, she was there twice a day, every day. And I think there's absolutely no doubt of the strength of feeling the love between Queen Camilla and King Charles, and it will be absolutely her who will be his rock in what undoubtedly is going to be a very difficult time ahead. And I'm sure he will be relieved, pleased. I don't want to put words in his mouth at all, but knowing that Prince Harry is on his way will no doubt be reassurance to him.
Yes. I was just looking back to the coronation. He, of course, pledged his loyalty to his king and put his hands between his father's hands. That was the moment that we all saw just 9 months ago. If you are just joining us, welcome to our continuing coverage of our breaking story this evening. Buckingham Palace announcing that the King is being treated for cancer. He will continue with state duties, we're told, but will be stepping back from public engagements during his treatment. During the King's recent hospital procedure, the statement said that for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty says the statement has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments during which time he has been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. The King is grateful, they say, to his medical team for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. His Majesty, it goes on, has chosen to share his diagnosis to prevent speculation and in the hope that it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. A spokesperson for the King has not revealed what type of cancer the King has, but says it is not prostate cancer. Last week, you'll recall the King was discharged from hospital following surgery for that enlarged prostate, a condition the palace had described as benign. And he has been seen in recent days. In fact, he was pictured just yesterday at the Sunday service in Sandringham at the Church of St Mary Magdalene. There he is in the company of the Queen Consort, waving to crowds of well-wishers who were there. It was his first public outing since his 3-night hospital stay just a week ago. So he is up and about on his feet. There have naturally been plenty of responses from political leaders today. Let's take you through a few of those. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, "I'm wishing His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. I have no doubt he'll be back to full strength in no time, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well." The opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer said, "On behalf of the Labour Party, I wish His Majesty all the very best for his recovery. We look forward to seeing him back to swift full health." The Northern Ireland First Minister Michelle O'Neill said, "I'm very sorry to hear of King Charles's illness and I want to wish him well for his treatment and a full and speedy recovery." A similar statement from the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, who said, His Majesty the King, we send every good wishes to him as he commences his treatment. We pray for a full and speedy recovery. The Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford, said, I'm saddened to hear the news that King Charles III is facing further health challenges. My thoughts and those of the people across Wales will be with him and his family this evening. I send him my very best wishes as he starts treatment for a full and swift recovery. We can speak to the historian and royal commentator Gareth Russell, who's joining us this evening. Gareth, good to have you on the programme. Can you, just looking back in history, can you remember a moment like this where the monarch, the head of state, had been sidelined by an illness and had to sort of step back a little bit, and whether there is a precedent at all for this? Are you muted, Gareth? Sorry, is your computer on mute?
Sorry, there we go.
No, there we go. We can hear you. Go ahead.
No, it's a great question, which I wish I should have answered on with full volume. Yes, Charles III's grandfather, George VI, was sidelined or stepped back quite a bit towards the end of his reign in 1951 and 1952. And now George VI was a very heavy smoker, and at that point, really, the link between cigarette smoking and cancer was not fully understood. However, you did see his wife, the future Queen Mother, and his daughter, the future Elizabeth II, step into more public appearances at that stage. That being said, particularly generally throughout Britain in the 1940s and 1950s, it was a more private generation, and certainly the royal family in particular. So whilst it was understood the king was unwell, at that point, there was nothing like this in terms of a full statement specifying that it's cancer, that the king will continue his constitutional roles, but not his public-facing duties, and that he is encouraging other people to get checked. So yes, there has been incidents like this within the royal family, but certainly not anything as full and frank a discussion as this.
We've been talking, Gareth, through the evening with Sarah here, who's with me in the studio, about the near history and the number of visits there have been overseas, particularly to his realm, to the important countries, as he would see it, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Commonwealth countries. It raises a big question over the events later this year. What would you say about that?
I think the future of the Commonwealth is always going to be paramount in the monarchy's mind. I don't think it's certain or even expected that the Commonwealth will remain unchanged. And as you say, there are discussions about the way in which the impact of a British head of state will flow through the Commonwealth and, as you say, those countries. At the minute, there are, however, quite differing attitudes towards the monarchy within those countries. There is, for instance, far more of a Republican movement within Australia than there is in Canada, and it'll be interesting to see how the King's health plays with those.
What about the public reaction here and how popular this king is vis-a-vis the late Queen?
It's sometimes an unfair comparison simply because Elizabeth II was so popular, both within the history of the British monarchy and monarchies across the world. But I do think we have seen Charles III's popularity rise slowly but considerably during his time as king. I also think there has generally been quite sturdy public approval for the way in which Buckingham Palace has handled this news of the King's health. There was really no discussion at all that Elizabeth II was very unwell until quite close to the end of her reign, whereas this seems to be a more open, dialogue-prone era for the monarchy, and that, I think, has landed very well as his increasing standing and popularity with the broader public.
Yes, if you were to ask someone from the royal household what the mood is, they would say, we carry on carrying on. But yes, there has been some speculation tonight about just how under pressure the royal family is at the moment because of the slimmed down effect that's gone on with Prince Harry stepping back and the Duke of York not being involved in royal duties. Is it too early at this stage to talk about a crisis, and will all the other royals be able to cover the duties of the Princess of Wales and the King?
It's probably too early to talk of a crisis, but it's certainly not too early to talk of a strain. Certainly there is the mechanism within the monarchy of the Councillors of State. We could probably expect Queen Camilla or the Prince of Wales or even the Princess Royal to carry out some of those functions if it was needed, though the palace has been very clear at the moment that it is not needed and that the constitutional functions of the king will continue as normal. But it's a great point. Is the slimmed down monarchy now too thin? It was never really intended to be this svelte, for want of a better word. They never intended it to get to this few number of working royals. So it is a question I think they've been asking themselves even before this about, are there too few working royals for the royal family to carry out a lot of the functions that have become customary? And I think incidents like this will probably accelerate those discussions within Buckingham and Kensington Palace.
Yeah, because Sarah's been doing some quick calculations, Gareth, and we think we've worked out that in fact he's taking on more, not less. As a 75-year-old, he turned 75 in November. He's been keeping up the pace that we saw the late Queen set, and that puts enormous strain on a man of, he's not an elderly man, but equally so, you might expect that he would that he would leave some of that to the younger royals.
Yes, I think that's true. And Princess Anne gave an interview last year, I believe, about the slimmed down nature of the monarchy. And she made the point that when that famous comment was made about slimming it down, it was the turn of the century. The Queen Mother and Princess Margaret were still alive. It was a much, much bigger working unit at that point, as were most of Elizabeth II's cousins. At this stage, the King and the Queen, and indeed all the working royals, we've certainly seen the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh pick up a lot more engagements than was expected. There is a lot of pressure on them. The really big problem for the royals is not this generation. It's how much will be expected to fall on William and Catherine, because there are very few working royals in the next generation below the king. And that's, I think, something that will become a problem they'll have to solve in a few years, if not before.
That's a really good point, Gareth. Yes, thank you very much for that. Gareth Russell there. Thank you for your time. Let's pick that up, actually, with Charles Hanson. He was, for many, many years, the press secretary to Queen Elizabeth from 1990 to 1997. Charles, it's lovely to talk to you again. Thank you for coming on the programme. Just address that last point that Gareth was making. It's not so much a crisis now, but a lot will fall on the Prince and Princess of Wales. And I just wonder in time, given how slimmed down the royal family is, whether we will put more on their children as a result of where the royal family is today.
Well, I think the royal family has survived so well because it's been able to adapt to different circumstances in each age. And I think at the present moment, with the King's illness and the Princess of Wales recuperating, some of those duties will have to be spread. Some of the engagements will need to be prioritized. So I think they'll get through as much as they can. Some of it can perhaps be done online with Zoom and other calls, and the schedule of royal engagements will need to be looked at carefully and perhaps spread out judiciously over the next few months until the King is back in full order, and one hopes very much the Princess of Wales as well. But during this time, there are several other members of the royal family that can help with undertaking public duties, and the King himself will continue to see state papers, will continue to have meetings, and he'll do that all under medical supervision. So in that sense, I don't think this is a very difficult thing to handle. It just requires reordering some of the priorities, and that can be done and will be done.
Yeah, busy time for the royal household. What about the emotional toll of this? You've spent some time, many years, within the royal household. I talked about that rather stiff upper lip attitude to illness. Certainly the Queen had it. How would Charles react to this, do you think?
Well, I think the King is a very fit man, and he enjoys a life that has a lot of exercise. He eats well, and he enjoys being busy, and I think that's true of many of the other members of the royal family. So I think they'll cope in those terms, but I think in the modern world, the monarchy is going to look a bit different, and a smaller monarchy will have to operate not only face-to-face, but also very much with the use of modern technology. And I think in that sense, the monarchy changes all the time. But what seems to stay pretty steady, Christian, is the degree of support for the monarchy. I think the King's position, the Prince of Wales's position, the Princess of Wales's position, and of course especially the Queen, Queen Camilla herself, who has been and is such a steadfast support to the King, both in personal terms and also will undertake some of his engagements on his behalf. And I think the Prince William, Prince of Wales, will be doing the same. He'll be looking after his wife and spending more time in that respect, and also stepping up and picking up some of the engagements that the King may not be able to do over the next month or two. But I think they'll manage. I mean, the whole basis of the British monarchy, however far back you look, is that it's very good at adjusting both to setbacks and also to responding to the more positive developments in our society and the way we live. And I think that flexibility has been one of the great strong points of our monarchy, is that it is very flexible.
We're not unique in this. I was just thinking, as you were saying that, about the reaction there was recently to General Powell, Secretary of Defence in Washington, who went in for treatment over the Christmas period for prostate cancer. And a lot of people ask questions about what would happen to the duties, and that tends to be the general reaction. And I know that the medical directors in the White House are constantly involved in the President's health. Is it the same in the royal household? I mean, he's made specific reference in this statement to the medical team. When you were carrying out your duties, were they ever present in the royal household?
Not ever present, because on the whole, the royal family has enjoyed rather good health. So they're certainly always responsive, and the nature of our medical profession is of such a high standard. And my experience in 7 years as press secretary is that whenever certainly a member of the royal family, but equally members of the royal household, would get very rapid attention, partly because of the nature of the public duties that their bosses were demanding, but also because you need to try and stick to engagements, and you also need to have both members of the royal family and their senior advisors in good health. That's an important point for the institution as a whole to run well and effectively.
And just a thought on the two sons, because it tends to hit sons hard when a mother or father is diagnosed with cancer. Prince Harry coming back rather rapidly before he goes to the Invictus Games. How close is the prince to his father, do you think? There's been an awful lot written in recent months, but does that reaction, him coming back so quickly, speak volumes to you?
I think it speaks well of him that the prince is going to spend a little time here before he goes to the Invictus Games, and I think he's as keen as any son in time of difficulty to be available, and he certainly seems to have responded quickly, spoken to his father, and I'm sure will try and be as supportive as he can be as a son. He's not undertaking, of course, some royal duties at the moment, but the fact that he's coming over and will see the king and other members of the family, and that's all, good boosting of morale, I think.
Charles, it's always good to see you. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Pleasure.
Around the world and across the UK, you are watching BBC News. Let's take a quick look at some of the responses, the numerous responses there have been around the globe to the news of King Charles's cancer diagnosis. From Westminster, we've heard from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Let me just read you again his statement, wishing the King a full and speedy recovery. He says, "I've no doubt he'll be back to full strength in no time, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well." And here's some other reaction.
Just found out, so it's quite devastating actually. Didn't know about that. It's sad to hear. I hope he's bless him.
It's not nice to hear anyone's been diagnosed with cancer. I kind of feel bad for him. He waited all these years to be king.
I feel quite sad about it. I think it's interesting with all the news about him that it's not to do with kind of the prostate thing, and they've said it's kind of a different cancer. But hopefully they've caught it early and it will be a positive outcome for him.
You're watching BBC News. We've been covering the statement this evening from Buckingham Palace about the King's diagnosis, diagnostic tests identifying a form of cancer. It doesn't tell us what sort of cancer he is being treated with, but he's held over the years a very active life. He's been injured during sporting pursuits, as I said a little earlier, but he has generally enjoyed good health. So let's have a look into his previous health issues, shall we? Last week, as we've been discussing, the King had hospital treatment for an enlarged prostate, and the tests subsequently performed during that treatment led to this current diagnosis. The King did catch coronavirus. In fact, he caught it twice. First in early 2020 before the vaccines, but he had only a mild form of the virus. And when he caught the virus again in 2022, he was by that time triple vaccinated. In 2008, he had a non-cancerous growth removed from the bridge of his nose in a minor routine procedure. And in 2003, the King had a hernia operation at the private King Edward VII Hospital in London. So I think that would be what most of us would undergo at some point through a general MOT. Nothing untoward in all of that. With me is our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell. A lot of people have said tonight he eats well. That's because he grows a lot of nice stuff at Highgrove, doesn't he? He does, but he does generally have an interest in his health and trying to do the right things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's spoken about that in several interviews over the years. He's very interested in his farming, interested in organic farming. We're not aware that he's much of a drinker. He looks after himself. He walks a lot. The Queen was talking quite recently about how extraordinarily fit her husband is. You know, he is 75. There's a lot of places up in Balmoral to go walking, to go strolling around. You know, so he's got the option to do that. But yeah, he's I think in relatively good nick for a man of his age. But you know, yeah, anybody can be diagnosed with cancer, right?
Absolutely so. There's no telling when it arrives, and you have to deal with it, as many people around the country do, in the best way possible. Let's bring in Ali Maqbool, who's just joined us, our religion editor. We did see him at the church at Sandringham yesterday. Has there been any reaction from the church to what's been announced tonight?
Well, yes, he is, of course, Supreme Governor of the Church of England, takes a keen interest in the workings of the church. And yes, we've just had the first reaction from the Church of England a short while ago. I spoke to the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell.
Obviously, it's come as a bit of a shock. We all knew that the King had a prostate condition that was being dealt with, but this is something else, and we don't quite know what it is. Nor should we, in a way. This is, first of all, a private matter for him and for his immediate family. But of course, he is the King, someone whom we love and care for. So my reaction is one of prayerful concern, prayerful hopefulness that this has been diagnosed early and will be treatable. So I'm praying for him.
And as you'd imagine, the advice from the Archbishop of York for those around the country concerned about the King's health is to pray for the King as well.
What about the other faiths?
Well, I mean, I talked about how much interest the King takes in the workings of the Church of England. He's well known for taking a huge interest in people of other faiths, both from a sort of theological point of view, but also as a prism through which to look at how the British landscape has changed over the years, a real appreciation of the way other faiths contribute to the country. He's had many meetings already over the last year. I went to one recently where he brings faith leaders together, sometimes under the radar, to just test the waters of where things are at the moment. So you can imagine a lot of people have come forward from lots of different faiths saying they're praying to lots of different gods. For the King, we've had reaction from, as you'd imagine, a lot of very diverse faith leaders. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who's the Archbishop of Westminster, who's head of the Catholic Church in England and Wales. He said, "I'm saddened to learn that King Charles is now facing a time of treatment for cancer. On behalf of the entire Catholic community in England and Wales, I offer His Majesty our warmest wishes and assurance of steadfast prayers for his full and speedy recovery." Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, who has sought the King's counsel very recently, after the attacks in Israel and so on. They met after that. It says, I'm saddened to have heard about His Majesty the King's diagnosis. I know that the Jewish communities of Great Britain and the Commonwealth will join me in wishing him a refuah shalema, which is a complete and swift recovery, a prayer for that at least. Sarah Mohammed, Muslim Council of Britain, also said, I'm saddened to hear about King Charles' diagnosis and extend my heartfelt wishes for His Majesty's strength and a swift recovery. So, look, he's a big, when we hear he's pulling back from some private, public engagements, a lot of those actually have a faith dimension to them. And he is a big part of the faith landscape. You saw that on the coronation. I mean, a lot of those, the furniture in place was a Christian ceremony, but he was the first, and it really reflected the man that brought in these other faith elements. So there's optimism from all of these faith groups, of course, but a lot of prayers.
As well there should be, because the treatments are so good now. I mean, that's his official role in the Defender of the Faith and his senior role within the Church of England, of course. But what about him? Because a lot of people at times like this around the country, people who suffer from cancer, do turn to their faith. Is he a deeply spiritual man?
Deeply spiritual man. You just need to read his book from 2013, Harmony, where he talks about how it's all part of the same picture, the way the environment is, where he even talks about the way people live, their economy, but faith is a huge pillar of how he sees the world works. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have an appreciation for those who are of no faith as well. He sees their part in all of this as well. But a hugely spiritual man. A lot of people had this, a lot of, let's say, very conservative people within the church were worried when the Queen passed away that somehow her steadfastness when it came to the Church of England, with its absence, would somehow mean something was lost from the church. But he is a deeply spiritual man. We've heard this from people he's known for a very long time, very close friends of his within the church. And he's shown that since, certainly through his coronation. There were lots of worries about how much change he'd make to the oaths, to the service itself. Well, actually, it was a very traditional Christian service. The oaths didn't change. But he just introduced these new elements, so there's this appreciation, aside from his own spirituality, of the spirituality of others.
Sarah, I've always been struck by how philosophical he is in his outlook as well, which I think probably puts him in good stead, doesn't it? When you think about your place in the world and what surrounds you, that's the sort of positive mental attitude you have to adopt when you're dealing with something like this.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously supported by Queen Camilla, who also strikes me as a sort of very positive person. I mean, the King is a very deep thinker. He will have a lot of time to think about sort of what is going on, and as you say, somebody very spiritual and somebody who has a lot to deal with at the moment.
Sarah Campbell, thank you very much. Thank you, Elaine, for coming in to talk to us about all things religion. We will continue, of course, to talk about the King's diagnosis. You are watching BBC News. Do stay with us.
Hello there. It's been a blustery, cloudy, but very mild start to the week for most of us. Things are going to change, mind you. This weather front and this band of cloud has brought about 5 inches of rain into Highland Scotland, and that's going to move southwards, allowing colder air to move down from the north. And we're seeing that colder air pushing into more of Scotland overnight as the rain band moves into southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Following that, a few sharp showers into northern Scotland, some icy patches by the morning, and a touch of frost likely here. In contrast, England and Wales, the temperatures are not falling very much at all. It's still cloudy, it's still quite windy as we head into Tuesday morning. And that band of rain will move away from southern Scotland and Northern Ireland into England and Wales, bringing some heavier rain over the hills of Northern England and Wales, and eventually some rain into the Midlands. Following that, sunshine for Scotland and Northern Ireland, wintry showers in the north of Scotland, some late sunshine in Northern England, but here it's going to be colder than it was today. The mild air, the windy air still there in southern parts of England. temperatures of 13 or 14 degrees. But even here, things will change overnight as this weather front takes some rain further south, allowing that colder air to move down from the north across more of the country by Wednesday morning, leading to a frost, but hopefully some sunshine around. But there will be some snow showers in northern parts of Scotland, some icy conditions here. We've still got some cloud and maybe a little rain at times in the far south of England and through the English Channel, but otherwise temperatures are going to be near 6 or 7 degrees, so a chilly day. Now, we've got a weather front just sitting across the English Channel on Wednesday, but as this area of low pressure moves in from the Atlantic, so that weather front moves northwards, takes rain northwards into the cold air. Now, whilst we're likely to stay as rain in southernmost parts of England and Wales, further north it's going to be sleet and snow that's going to be falling, that's going to bring some disruption. And there is a warning out from the Met Office for Thursday into Thursday night. In this area, widely there'll be a few centimetres of snow, but there'll be more than that over the hills. Now, it is a yellow warning from the Met Office because it's so far ahead, and there may well be some changes as well. One of the uncertainties is how far north this wet weather will get. It looks like Thursday should be dry for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it will be cold.
I'm telling you, there's going to be a revolution.
Have you considered resigning over this? Because you're clearly embarrassed.
Of course, I have been. I have thought about this.
I want to be totally honest with you, and I am being honest with you.
At least this should be a common ground for everyone. We should defend international law.
In the spirit of your title of Hard Talk, you're completely wrong.
I'm not offended, but I want to hear why.
You're completely wrong.
Hard Talk. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
This programme asks plain questions with the help of the unrivalled range of BBC journalists right across the world and gathered here in this building. I'll also draw my time reporting on global conflict, frontline experience that helps me know who to talk to and who to listen to, meaning our analysis is unbiased with absolutely no spin.
Unspun World. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Live from London, this is BBC News. King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. Buckingham Palace says he will continue with state duties but step back from public engagements during his treatment. The palace says the cancer was identified during the King's recent trip to hospital for an enlarged prostate, but haven't said what type of cancer it is. Prince Harry has spoken to his father and will travel back to the UK in the coming days. Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. Welcome to our continuing coverage of our breaking story this evening. The announcement from Buckingham Palace that the King is being treated for cancer. He will continue his state duties but will step back from public engagements, we're told, during that treatment. During the King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, says the statement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he's been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. The King is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. The statement goes on to say that His Majesty has chosen to share his diagnosis to prevent speculation and in the hope that it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are also affected by cancer. Spokesperson for the King, though, did not reveal what type of cancer the King has, although they do say it is not prostate cancer. You'll recall that last week the King was discharged from hospital following surgery for an enlarged prostate, a condition the palace had described as benign. He was in fact pictured yesterday out and about at the Sunday service at Sandringham. These are pictures taken outside the Church of St Mary Magdalene on the Sandringham estate in the company of the Queen Consort, Queen Camilla. It was their first public outing since his 3-night hospital stay just a week ago. But you can see him smiling, waving to well-wishers who were there, so clearly on his feet and in reasonably good spirits yesterday. There have been responses from the world of politics, as you would expect, and so let me bring you a few of those. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, wishing His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. I have no doubt he'll be back to full strength in no time, he said, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well. The opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said, on behalf of the Labour Party, I wish His Majesty all the very best for his recovery. We look forward to seeing him back to swift, full health. The Northern Ireland First Minister Michelle O'Neill, who's had a very busy day today, of course, said, I'm very sorry to hear of King Charles's illness and I want to wish him well for his treatment and a full and speedy recovery. Here is the reaction from the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, sending His Majesty the King every good wishes, he said, as he commences his treatment. We pray for a full and speedy recovery. The Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford said, I'm saddened to hear the news that King Charles III is facing further health challenges. My thoughts and those of the people across Wales will be with him and his family this evening. I send my very best wishes as he starts treatment for a full and swift recovery. And in the last hour, the Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf has been giving his reaction to the King's cancer diagnosis.
Can I send my thoughts and indeed my prayers to His Majesty the King and wish him well for a full recovery and a return back to public life. And let me also send my very best wishes and my thoughts with Her Majesty the Queen and all the members of the royal family who will be deeply worried at this time. I don't think it matters whether you're a member of the royal family or not. If a family member has cancer, that is always going to be extremely worrying indeed. So I want to send them my very best wishes, not just on behalf of myself personally, the government I lead, but in terms on behalf of the entire nation.
Well, joining me in the studio, as you can see, is Geeta Harry, former Communications Director at Number 10, while Boris Johnson was there. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
We'll talk about the anxiety there will be within the family and in wider parts of the country, but just in the practical sense, what will be happening, do you think, in the corridors around Number 10 tonight?
Well, it's obviously shocking when it happens, it's unnerving when it happens, and it does cause practical issues because the level of interest around the world is enormous, and just actually responding to that is quite a big operation. Even when you don't actually say that much, saying a little bit helpfully to an awful lot of people around the entire globe who take an interest is something that requires a lot of organisation and a lot of management. But I think in the end what it does is, much as everybody tries to contain themselves, you always wonder, as you do when it happens to a close relative, when it happens to a friend, you always wonder, what if they don't cope as well? What if they get down over it, even if they recover? And so that anxiety creeps into everything else, and it changes the tone of politics. One benign thing that will come out of this is that I think everybody will behave in a slightly more civilised manner towards each other, because we've had a very sobering reminder that you can be the most privileged person in the world, or one of them certainly, and you're not immune from the things that will affect most of us at some point in our lives.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, in terms of the interaction between the palace and Number 10, the private secretaries, I presume, talk to each other quite regularly. But when you were talking about the statement that you put out and how carefully calibrated that is, and how far do you go with it, who will take the lead on that?
So the relationship is handled at a number of levels. Private secretaries talk to private secretaries, communications chief talk to communication chiefs, and then what you've got to make sure is that on both sides they're talking to each other, and the principals talk to the principals. I'm sure that the Prime Minister will have had a conversation, or is about to, with King Charles himself. So there's a number of levels to the relationship, and what everybody's trying to do is to reflect a similar tone and to avoid creating unnecessarily, accidentally or wherever, anything that causes some confusion. And one loose word, somebody confusing something they've heard or agreed to say officially with something they've heard anecdotally, one slip of the tongue like that, and with a global media watching, it can turn into something that's a big diversion and a little less dignified than people want these things to be.
It's to be admired that he's been as open as he has, because his health is his own private affair, and it will be of use to, I think, a lot of people around the country who get a diagnosis like this. But of course, because you've worked in the world we all work in, there will be immense speculation from here on in, and lots of people trying to find out what it is.
I think it's to his credit so far that he has proactively told us about an enlarged prostate, proactively allowed us to see him coming out of hospital. He's not been hysterical about it. He's been very dignified. He hasn't played it down, and I think he hasn't played it up either. And he's avoided, on a day like today, a situation where we are guessing all of this before we are told. So it's always better when the news is proactively put out there by people who recognise the responsibility they have in public life to all the people who take an interest in their role in our constitution and all that. But you're right, in the end, it'd be nice to think that they can draw a line and just say that's it and the rest is private. But we all know that's not true, and something will emerge, and we're all naturally curious, and every time King Charles will be seen in public now, there'll be speculation about how he looks, whether he's frowning, whether he's smiling, whether he's lost weight. All that stuff is inevitable, and even if the BBC conducts itself with great dignity, which it always does, of course, there are less scrupulous people around the world. Not everybody feels as positive about the concept of monarchy. Not everybody feels as positive about this royal family. But at least tonight, they have controlled the news, they've put it out there. He's been admirably open without encouraging us to be too voyeuristic, and it's had a sobering effect on our politics and for the family who've been through a lot of trauma. And I just imagine by the standards of any family, the pain that they've gone through in that family over the last couple of years, the fact that Prince Harry is on his way back to the UK is, again, it's a little bit of every cloud has a tiny silver lining.
Sarah Campbell's with us, our royal correspondent. It's a really important point, that. I mean, we've had a diagnosis of cancer for Sarah Ferguson. There is, of course, the issue with the Princess of Wales, who's recovering from an abdominal surgery, which, by all accounts, was quite serious. And the loss that they've suffered in the last 2 years, it's a lot to go through, even for a family as privileged as this. It's
been an extraordinary start, I think, to 2024. As you said, so many issues coming all at once. But trying it, I've been quite interested with the amount of information we've had today, and very clearly saying, sort of from the political perspective, that the weekly meetings with Rishi Sunak, they're going to continue, that the King is going to continue sort of looking through his red boxes. And, so there is that feeling of trying to keep a lid on it, that it's business as usual. But obviously behind the scenes, this is a family. We always say this, don't we? That we see them as the King, but he is a father, he is a grandfather. There were already, as you've alluded to, medical issues going on with other members of the family. And now this.
I think a lot of people are always fascinated by the red boxes, which are slightly out of sight, out of mind. But of course, the Prime Minister, his chief ministers, and the King are every day attending to matters of state in the paperwork that's in these boxes. How important is that interaction between the Prime Minister and the King in terms of the information that's being passed to and fro?
It's very important that people understand, what the other side is up to, and that you don't get into a situation, got into one or two while I was there, where there's a little tension and misunderstanding, about something the King may have said about the Prime Minister, or the other way around, or a policy that, the King, or it's implied he disapproves of. So that is very important. With red boxes, there's nothing in a red box these days that couldn't be in a computer file, but there's a bit of a ritual to carrying the red box. But the paperwork, the decisions that have to be made, never stop. And that's the problem. When we find with with our families and with our relatives and with our friends, there's a tension between saying you need to let go of all of this to rest, because rest is part of the recuperation and all that, and the people themselves who want to carry on, because they need to carry on. They don't want to sit around worried about their health. They have a duty to carry on, which they feel very conscious of, most people like that. And so it's a tension then, to what extent is doing the job helping their morale versus doing the job is actually hindering their recovery.
But I imagine his medical team will have a role in that. He won't be able to overexert himself if he's doing things properly.
But I think Yuta makes a really good point, because people talk, don't they, about Queen Elizabeth II, that she was working right up until the very last day. And so there is that sort of example to follow, that sense of duty, perhaps to sense that one has to do that. And you're absolutely right that his medical team will have to advise what is best for his health, and perhaps, carrying on with the red boxes, because even if physically it's not a strain, mentally, of course it is.
But on the other hand, it's a positive sign. We don't need counsellors involved. His health is such that he can get on with light duties, but and carry on behind closed doors as he would ordinarily.
Yeah, and sometimes that sort of life sobering moment, which this is, even though hopefully he will be well, it's one of those things that remind you of your mortality. Sometimes that clarifies a lot of decisions. I remember when Boris Johnson was taken into hospital and had was in a really bad way in a life support unit. When he came out, it had changed his view a little bit. It had changed his attitude towards risk. It had made him less patient about getting things done that he cared about. And so it can affect the decision making, usually in a positive way. So you're left again where we started with this practical issue, that the amount of work that someone like the King does in terms of literally turning up and being there and talking to people and opening things, there's an awful lot of that, and somebody else has got to do that now. And we know that another royal is out for the count. So, how are you going to share those duties? There's still as much work to go around and far fewer people to do it.
Yeah, we'll maybe talk about the other members of the family shortly. Before we do that, let's just talk about some of the reaction from around the world, and specifically from Washington. President Joe Biden expressing in the last hour or so his concern upon hearing the King's diagnosis. Let's have a listen to that.
Message from King Charles. I'm concerned about him. Just heard his diagnosis, but I'll be talking to him, God willing.
And what's next on the order bill?
Order bill, sir. What's next? Folks, you got him for hopefully passage in the Senate.
How?
All right, enough votes. We're working the room today.
Yeah, President probably his uppermost thoughts, that border bill that is going through the Senate this week. But interesting, given the speculation there's been about that relationship, because of course President Biden did not come to the coronation, that he feels it incumbent to call the King over the next 24 hours or so. And you might recall that he did have tea with King Charles at Windsor Castle last July. Our correspondent Duncan Kennedy is in Windsor for us this evening. And I guess from what we've just heard there, Duncan, you can assume that actually there is a relationship between the two men such that he feels he needs to call him.
Yes, I think it is fair to say that. They've got a decent relationship going there. President Biden doesn't always agree with all things British, but yeah, the two men, by all accounts, got on well when they did meet. He couldn't make the coronation for whatever reasons, but these things, people like this don't hold grudges. They do meet. They're able to talk about so many subjects. These men have vast experience, of advanced years, of course, so they've been around the block a few times, these two gentlemen, and they will know exactly how the world works, and will have a lot in common because of that. Not only President Biden commenting tonight, of course, we've had Donald Trump also describing King Charles as a wonderful man. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying he wishes the King has a speedy recovery. And even people like Frank Bruno and Gary Lineker have been tweeting their best wishes for the King as well. So really global reaction to this story that came in at 6 o'clock tonight. And it's no wonder. He is the head of state. He is this monarch figure, obviously many years in the shadow of the Queen. Now that is no longer the case. He's come into his own. He is the crown king of our country, and he generates this kind of reaction right around the world. But also,
Christian, at the very sort of lowest level, if you like, ordinary folk in the street that we've been speaking to here in Windsor have been genuinely shocked, and to a large extent have been wishing to pass on their best wishes to the King as well. We've just been speaking to a man from Dernock in the Scottish Highlands who has come down to Windsor because he's a royalist. He says he loves all things royal. He goes to Buckingham Palace to look at the palace there, but he's never been to Windsor before. He came here to see the castle. He'll be going in tomorrow. He was pretty shocked when we told him that King Charles had cancer, but he stood and chatted with us for a while, saying how much he admired the King. He really liked the way the King's been getting on with his life now that he has become King. He also admires Queen Camilla as well, very much a fan of the royal family. And so when you tell people like that the King has got cancer, it comes as quite a shock. These people didn't expect it. They haven't been following the news all evening. So when the likes of us tell these people, it is a genuine shock. We had a group of men from India. Those two are also here on holiday, and they too were shocked. Of course, India, part of the Commonwealth. I think people, whenever you tell them the word cancer, it comes as a bit of a shock to them. When you mention the word King Charles in the same sentence, well, that's doubly shocking for them. A lot of people have been wishing to express their sympathies to the King, hope he gets better, but generally feeling that this is one of those moments that they will remember kind of thing, the day when it was announced that King Charles has got cancer, but the overwhelming feeling, one of shock and also determined to pass on their best wishes and hoping he comes through this.
Yes, Royal Windsor, of course, a town with a very special connection to the royal family. Duncan, thank you very much for that. We've been talking about reaction from Washington. We've also had reaction from Canada in the last hour, but this just in from Australia. Anthony Albanese spoke to reporters in Canberra just a short time ago. He said, "Can I just say that today the thoughts of all Australians are with King Charles and his family. I will be sending a message to the palace this morning, and we hope that King Charles has a speedy recovery and a return to his duties as soon as possible." We've just been talking in the last hour, Gita, about this visit to Australia. The first visit he would make as king to Australia, which has that added importance. And the concern that there would be, I guess, in all corridors of power here, that he might not be able to go now.
Yeah, and that's back to that tension between wanting to keep the show on the road and not doing things that are clearly potentially detrimental to your recovery and your health. And that's a really tough question. And we know that the concept of duty is deeply ingrained in them, and they know how many people they let down if they don't go. But it's going to have to be a really hard-headed decision in the end, and it depends as well. You know, we've all seen close friends and relatives go through the kind of treatments that we assume he's going to be on. They take their toll too. They take their toll really badly on some people, and so it's debilitating.
There is a conversation in Canada about republicanism, but especially so in Australia, and that's why I would think the King feels it incumbent to travel this year.
Undoubtedly, and I think that was, we spoke about it earlier, that I think this year was the year when those trips, they hadn't been officially announced, but I think the expectation was that he would both travel to Australia and to Canada and to CHOGM, the heads of government meeting in October. And I've been on those tours, and they are frenetic, they are hectic, they are massively draining. And really, there's kind of no other way to do it. And so there has to be quite a serious consideration about how difficult that may be. But we are going into the realms of speculation because we simply don't know, you know, how long the treatment is going to take, how successful, how early it's been caught. So it may well be those trips will happen, perhaps just pushed back a little bit in the schedule, but we will have to wait and see.
Yeah, that is of course feasible, that they just slip the dates a little. No confirmation, as Sarah says, that those visits will be off. We'll talk plenty more around the world and across the UK. You're watching BBC News. For our viewers here in the UK, there have been numerous responses to the King's diagnosis. From Westminster, we've heard from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who said that he was wishing His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. I've no doubt he said he will be back to full strength in no time. And I know the whole country will be wishing him well. And here's some reaction today from the streets of London.
Just found out, so it's quite devastating actually. Yeah, didn't know about that. It's sad to hear. I hope he's bless him.
It's not nice to hear anyone's been diagnosed with cancer. I kind of feel bad for him. He waited all these years to be king.
I feel quite sad sad about it. I think it's interesting with all the news about him that it's not to do with kind of the prostate thing, and they've said it's kind of a different cancer. But hopefully they've caught it early and it will be a positive outcome for him.
Yeah, let's hope so. The initial reaction to the news we got tonight, but plenty more reaction, no doubt, to come. You're live with BBC News. A little earlier in the programme, we were joined by our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, who was reflecting on how the King might be coping with this diagnosis.
It is something that whoever you are, however mighty or however humble your position, takes an adjustment, a psychological adjustment. That awful word when the surgeon says to you that, yes, you have cancer. For him, for his family, in the days since he was discharged from hospital for the treatment for the enlarged prostate, a benign condition, we're told, they will have had to just come to terms with the reality of the situation in which they find themselves. Now, he's a man in his mid-70s. He is fit. He is resilient. He keeps himself in good shape. So those will be positive aspects of this. But it is now a matter for the surgeons, for the medical team, the Royal Medical Household, to carry on with the treatment, which we are told has already begun. And we are told by Buckingham Palace that there are positive aspects to all of this, that this cancer, this unspecified, unidentified cancer, it's not prostate cancer, as one might have assumed, but it is a cancer nonetheless, a cancer which they have discovered in the course of treating the enlarged prostate. So it will be, one imagines, a complex program of treatment, a treatment that, of course, many millions of people have had to get used to, come to terms with, and deal with in their lives. And I think both the King and Buckingham Palace feel that there is merit now in being as open as possible about the situation in which he finds himself. And of course, this in marked contrast to the older generation of members of the British royal family who regarded confidentiality about medical matters as a priority. So, of course, we learnt very little about the condition of the late Queen, Queen Elizabeth, who died just 17 months ago. In terms of the implications for other members of the British royal family, well, as Sarah was saying just a moment ago, there will be now much greater pressure on other senior members, in particular Prince William, in particular on Queen Camilla, who will be expected to step forward and take over at least some of those public-facing duties that hitherto had been expected to be performed by King Charles. And it is the hope, Buckingham Palace tells us, that he will be able to resume those public-facing duties as soon as possible. But in reality, that surely is going to be a matter of months now, and will depend entirely on how that treatment performed by the medical specialists, how that treatment goes.
Indeed so. Thanks to Nick for that. Months of treatment. The important point, in fact, as we were watching that video you were making, is that not everybody will get the same treatment as the King. And in fact, on another channel tonight, the Prime Minister is saying, look, we've missed our waiting list targets, and we know that people have died who were wanting cancer treatment because they can't get any care.
Yeah, there's one thing this is going to do. It's going to push health right up to the top of the political agenda. It was pretty high anyway. It's a bone of contention. There's been good stories today about the potential of digitizing records so that you can cut waiting lists like that, make the NHS more efficient. But at the moment, the waiting lists are long, and in some places, the impact of that is literally life undermining and life threatening, and people do die, as you say. So he's obviously going to get the best treatment available, and I think everybody would wish that. But it's also going to shine a light on what exactly everybody else is getting, and that is going to turbocharge the issue in a year when we're almost certainly going to have a general election.
An issue that will no doubt have occurred to the Prime Minister at this time. Plenty more reaction to come. You're looking at live pictures of Buckingham Palace. The Royal Standard is flying tonight. The King is in residence. We'll talk more about his diagnosis.
Hello there. It's been a blustery, cloudy, but very mild start to the week for most of us. Things are going to change, mind you. This weather front and this band of cloud has brought about 5 inches of rain into Highland Scotland, and that's going to move southwards, allowing colder air to move down from the north. And we're seeing that colder air pushing into more of Scotland overnight as the rain band moves into southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Following that, a few sharp showers into northern Scotland, some icy patches by the morning, and a touch of frost likely here. In contrast, England and Wales, the temperatures are not falling very much at all. It's still cloudy, it's still quite windy as we head into Tuesday morning. And that band of rain will move away from southern Scotland and Northern Ireland into England and Wales, bringing some heavier rain over the hills of northern England and Wales, and eventually some rain into the Midlands. Following that, sunshine for Scotland and Northern Ireland, wintry showers in the north of Scotland, some late sunshine in northern England, but here it's going to be colder than it was today. The mild air, the windy air still there in southern parts of England. Temperatures of 13 or 14 degrees. But even here, things will change overnight as this weather front takes some rain further south, allowing that colder air to move down from the north across more of the country by Wednesday morning, leading to a frost, but hopefully some sunshine around. But there will be some snow showers in northern parts of Scotland, some icy conditions here. We've still got some cloud and maybe a little rain at times in the far south of England and through the English Channel, but otherwise temperatures are going to be near 6 or 7 degrees, so a chilly day. Now, we've got a weather front just sitting across the English Channel on Wednesday, but as this area of low pressure moves in from the Atlantic, so that weather front moves northwards, takes rain northwards into the cold air. Now, whilst we're likely to stay as rain in southernmost parts of England and Wales, further north it's going to be sleet and snow that's going to be falling, that's going to bring some disruption. And there is a warning out from the Met Office for Thursday into Thursday night. In this area, widely there'll be a few centimetres of snow, but there'll be more than that over the hills. Now, it is a yellow warning from the Met Office because it's so far ahead, and there may well be some changes as well. One of the uncertainties is how far north this wet weather will get. It looks like Thursday should be dry for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it will be cold.
In September 2014, a group of students were violently attacked on their way to a protest in Mexico City. 43 young men were taken away by municipal police and have never been seen again.
We had worked in a number of cases in Mexico where forensic evidence had been tampered with, and you're constantly asking yourself, what part of the evidence can you trust?
Disappeared. Mexico's missing 43.
I want Hip Life to be that good story that lifted black folks in Africa and all over the world, gave young people a voice.
It's part of being an actor, because I always say as an actor you can't be a control freak. You have to be willing to give up control.
So I like this idea of a live piece of art, and I just like this idea of making invisible visible through art.
Sometimes you can have really serious portraits, but you've got such a great laugh. I feel like I want to capture some of the candid nature of your personality.
Opera House can and must be many things. It shouldn't cater just to one audience, and it shouldn't be focused on just one corner of the repertoire. It must do everything and be open to the interests of many different people.
Inspiring arts and culture. Watch now on iPlayer.
Live from London, this is BBC News. King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. Buckingham Palace says he will continue with state duties but step back from public engagements during his treatment. The palace says the cancer was identified during the King's recent trip to hospital for an enlarged prostate, but they haven't said what type of cancer it is. Prince Harry has spoken to his father and will travel back to the UK in the coming days. World leaders, including the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the US President Joe Biden, have sent their well wishes as the King begins his treatment. Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. If you are just joining us, welcome to our continuing coverage of the breaking story from Buckingham Palace tonight. The announcement that the King is being treated for cancer. He will continue his state duties, but we're told will step back from public engagements during his treatment. If you haven't seen the statement, let me read it to you. This is what it says. The King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement. During that process, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatment, they say, during which he's been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties. Throughout this period, His Majesty will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. The King, they go on, is grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, which was made possible thanks to his recent hospital procedure. He remains wholly positive, they say, about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. And His Majesty has chosen to share this diagnosis, says the statement, to prevent speculation and in the hope that it may assist public understanding for all those around the world who are affected by cancer. A spokesperson for the King said subsequently that they're not revealing what type of cancer he is suffering from, although we know it's not prostate cancer. Last week, the King was discharged from hospital following a surgery for an enlarged prostate, a condition the palace had described as benign. These are the recent pictures we've been showing you, taken yesterday at Sandringham at the Church of St Mary Magdalene on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. You can see he's in reasonably good spirits there, waving to well-wishers in the company of Queen Camilla. That was his first public outing since that 3-night hospital stay a week ago. A slightly extended stay, which perhaps should have told us that maybe something was amiss. There have been responses from politicians through the day. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak extending His Majesty a full and speedy recovery, saying, I've no doubt he'll be back to full strength in no time, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well. The opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer, on behalf of the Labour Party, I wish His Majesty all the very best for his recovery. We look forward to seeing him back to swift, full health. This from the First Minister in Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill. I'm very sorry, she said, to hear of King Charles's illness. I want to wish him well for his treatment and a full and speedy recovery. The leader of the DUP, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, sending His Majesty the King every good wishes as he commences his treatment. We pray for a full and speedy recovery. This from the Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford. I'm saddened to hear the news that King Charles III is facing further health challenges. My thoughts and those of people across Wales will be with him and his family this evening. I send my very best wishes as he starts treatment for a full and swift recovery. With me in the studio, Geeta Harry, former Communications Director at Number 10, and also Sarah Campbell, our Royal Correspondent. We were just saying in the break, discussing among ourselves, that the King won't want this to define him, and there is a danger, Geeta, that it does.
That is the issue, and some people, when they get a serious illness, they feel an obligation to share a lot because it might help others to understand something, it may demystify it, and the good news these days is an awful lot of people survive cancer. You know, it's not what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So it can be indeed a sort of positive journey with a happy ending. But Prince Charles has strong views. Well, he's a key constitutional role. He, sees the Prime Minister every week. We're going to have a general election this year. The Prime Minister will go to the King to call that. He has strong views about the environment, which he cares about, strong views about conservation. He has a lot of issues with his families. So it's family. So there's a lot to talk about. And the problem is when somebody so prominent has something that we are all understandably preoccupied by, because the odds of us all getting it are pretty high these days, that you end up only really sort of clocking where he is on that, and everything else starts to fade, and that's when the authority and the presence and all the rest of it is in danger of going. And finding the balance between not talking about it and looking evasive and talking about it so much that people forget that this guy was ahead of his times by decades in terms of conservation and the environment and all that. So,
and we talked about this, didn't we, at the time of the coronation, because he had been Prince of Wales for so long and we were getting used to describing him as King Charles. What was this reign going to be defined as? What sort of king was he going to be? 17 months into the job, he won't want to be the king who got cancer. There's so much more to his legacy than that, and that's what he will want people to focus on. Yeah,
and one got the impression that he was really just kind of getting into his stride, really. It was a busy old
Especially
year.
Especially with over 500 royal duties a year.
500 royal duties, yeah, so up slightly from the year before. And we've been saying again, so it was kind of UK focused much more last year, although obviously there were state visits to France, to Germany, and in that role going abroad, the King does a very important job on behalf of the government. You know, these are at the invitation of the Foreign Office. He is there to go and sort of promote brand Britain abroad. So these foreign trips are really actually very important to...
As he showed in Dubai at COP.
Absolutely, yeah, in COP in Dubai.
Almost a guest of honour there because of the role he plays.
Yeah, completely and utterly. And you got the impression he really enjoyed going to COP28 and speaking there and being able to talk about an issue that was really incredibly
these are the pictures from COP, incidentally.
So there he is. And for the moment, all that has to go on hold. And you're right that there must be a certain sense of frustration that having spent so long waiting to get the top job, if you like, that has happened, and now something which, for understandable reasons, has got to completely take over and has got to be the priority, and everything else has to take second place. And, you know, we were talking about how much information we have and how much information we don't have. It's a very difficult balance, I think, for the palace and for the government as well, to work out how much to tell people, because if the King suddenly starts, not turning up to engagements, questions will inevitably be asked. So they had to say something. And it is quite a tricky balance, working out how much to say, how much to leave speculation. But of course, they don't want too much speculation, but they've kind of given enough information, but not everything.
Thought about Prince William. How much does he have to handle at the moment? He's looking after his poor wife, who's convalescing, the kids, his royal duties, and now his father.
Yeah, and he still has a sort of feud with his brother, unless they can hopefully patch that up. I think what Sarah touched on there is a delicate issue of a sort of vulnerability, because in the end, his role is to be the head of state, the figurehead, the whole title, king. If you think of King of the Forest, King of the Skies.
Well, no one else can really do that for him.
It projects a sort of, alpha maledom traditionally, if you're Darwinian about it, but it certainly projects somebody who is there when everything else, and frankly our politics is very divided, people are very anxious about possibly seeing sort of conscription and war. There are all kinds of things that people are worried about. And one of the things the royal family has given, even to people who are sort of borderline Republicans, is some sense of continuity, that things go on. And I think the tragedy for him is he's waited so long, and he gets there, and he's an old man when he gets there. And it's unfair, but you put two and two together, you get an old man and an illness like this, and it's not projecting the office, if you like, in the end. And that then, inevitably, people are not going to do it in a day or two, but inevitably the discussion is going to...
There are 75-year-olds around the country screaming at the television right now. He won't feel old, and he is quite good health, though. You know, we shouldn't forget that, and we don't know specifically the prognosis. So, and there is in this statement, and I've made the point through the evening, there is a note of optimism in the way it's been worded. So we keep our fingers crossed on that. Let's tell you what. Shall we get a view on the health side of things? Bring in Dr. Jeff Foster, a GP who specialises in men's health. GP Foster, it's good to have you on the programme this evening to give us your expertise. I was saying to Fergus Walsh a little earlier, it's very difficult in this circumstance because we can't speculate and we don't know what type of cancer it is. But generally speaking, if you were advising a man in very good health, broadly, of the age of 75, and he was diagnosed with cancer, what would your advice to him be?
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's quite a broad question.
It is, I know.
I think the key is always, you are more likely to get certain cancers at certain ages, and obviously in your 70s. I mean, we can only speculate, obviously, but what's probably happened is you go in for your scan for your benign prostate. There's no suspicion that the prostate itself is cancerous, but because you're having checks and balances for all other things, they probably will have screened for other processes over time. He probably will have had a CT or MRI scan around the pelvis, and either a blood test will have come back abnormal, or part of the scan will highlight something that looks abnormal. And the two most common ones you'll pick up will probably be either a type of blood cancer called myeloma, which is quite common in that age group, or it might be something entirely separate, such as a bowel or something else issue that you can pick up just from looking at the scan. The first step for all these sorts of patients is get as much detail as you can, and that will help you decide your types of treatment, whether it's a chemotherapy, whether it's a surgery, radiotherapy, etc., and then you can kind of get an idea of what your progress and what your prognosis might be moving forward.
In terms of, we've been discussing his workload, which is significant, of course, for a head of state. Does it serve people well to keep busy? Does the sort of mental process of getting through a red box, does that help, or does it get in the way of the treatment?
It's very individual, but certainly from all the cancer patients I've helped look after over sort of 20 years, people approach these things really differently, don't they? And some people will want to get on and make life as normal as they can, and they won't want it to get in the way of things, and others will have no ability to focus on anything else other than the cancer itself. You know, based on what we know, and it's only a public perception of the monarch as he is, he's somebody that appears to enjoy the duties of the work he does, and one would imagine that he'd want to do as much as is physically possible at this time, because it keeps you motivated, keeps you distracted, and stops you perhaps focusing on something that's less pleasant.
Do the treatments get in the way of that? Do they leave people so low that they actually can't do the physical work?
I think it's fair to say that no matter what cancer treatment you have, you've got to be of super resilient, tough stuff at any age to be able to not be affected by cancer therapies. And if you're somebody in their 70s, then it's pretty fair to say you're going to be knocked back a little bit. Now, if this is a surgery, then obviously the surgery itself will have its physical toll, and that's pretty straightforward. But even the chemotherapies or radiotherapies, they knock you out, and people are exhausted when they're on chemotherapies and radiotherapies, and you just cannot do your full-time day job at the same time as going through cancer treatment. You have to adapt, you have to amend, and you have to give yourself that time to get back on track.
How pleased are you that someone in the King's position has taken a decision to be as open as he can be, in the hope that it advances awareness around the country?
If you're in a position where you've chosen men's health as a specialty, and you're desperately trying to get people, men in particular, obviously, or men in this case, to talk about things they don't want to talk about, you don't get better PR than the monarch talking about men's health. So it's terrible he's unwell, and of course none of us would ever wish it. But in terms of a PR media tool, he's been my dream. This guy is amazing. We've had more people coming in talking about men's health than I've ever had in sort of 10 years of doing this.
Really? I mean, since we were talking about an enlarged prostate, you've noticed the uptick, have you?
Oh yeah, even with NHS and privately, we've had people that have come in for non-related men's health issues, and it's not just prostate. They've kind of made this jump and go, well, actually, no, if the King can talk about his prostate, maybe we could talk about our erectile dysfunction problems that are purely embarrassing for men to talk about. Maybe we could talk about testosterone deficiency, another thing that guys don't feel happy talking about. All these sort of things that are sort of a bit nervous, a bit uncomfortable about. So many guys have started to come forward, and we've noticed it on all aspects of things. It's been really positive.
Geeta was making the very valid point at this time, when we've had such difficulties in the health service over the past year, that not everyone will get the treatment that the King will get over the coming weeks and months. Does that frustrate you, that at the moment cancer care is not getting the attention it deserves?
So I've been a doctor, this is my 20th year now, and I can categorically say that in the last couple of years, it's just been the worst it's ever been in the NHS. I struggle day to day to go through our job without finding failings at a managerial and political level that don't drive me absolutely up the wall. And it's so hard because it's not your patient's fault, and they're desperately just trying to get the care that they had even 5 years ago that we just cannot offer them anymore. And I can't see how primary care is ever going to go back to what it was until there's some radical change. And sadly, this has an awful impact on people's health and cancer care in particular.
Yeah. Before I let you go, Jeff, lots of men will be watching. Get tested.
Yeah, but I mean, don't just go up to your doctor and go, I want a PSA test, because that isn't going to help. And like I've already said, that the demand in the NHS is absolutely enormous as it is. I think we spend a lot of time in medicine talking about screening for cancers, and maybe one of the best things we could do is talk about how do we avoid getting cancer in the first place? How can we make sure men are healthier and fitter? How can we help them lead better lives in general? So that, yes, cancer screening is really important, but what can we do for all men just to help them live longer and better quality lives?
And what is that? Exercise, good food?
Sadly, none of this is really earth-shattering stuff. And it really is good diet, exercise, not sitting down all day, getting a good night's sleep, not being too stressed in your life, not being overweight, don't smoke, have alcohol in moderation. And we've heard it like 1,000 times, but it really does make a difference. And in prostate cancer and most other cancers, actually, they're really lifestyle susceptible. So if you can do something, maybe this is the kind of thing they go, actually, you know what, I will try and make my life a bit healthier. And it's a good opportunity to take that on board.
Well said, and I'm sure that's what the King is hoping many people will talk about in the coming days. Really good to talk to you, Jeff. Thank you very much indeed. Not sure I really meet the threshold on any of those things, actually. I've been sat down all day and I've had an egg sandwich. Oh dear. Anyway, but that's the sobering point for the Prime Minister, who might just be watching some of the coverage over the next 24 hours. There's a doctor saying it's cancer care at the moment is not getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah, I mean, that will really hurt, because he couldn't have been more blatant about it. And yet the argument would be from the Prime Minister is that more money's gone into the NHS than ever, year after year after year after year. What we have had, of course, is a global pandemic that cost us £400 billion, which we will pay for financially for a long time. But it also meant that an awful lot of preemptive work that, you know, would normally catch cancers early or would keep us all healthier didn't happen. You know, every night for a while we got the stats on one particular killer and we forgot about all the other things that kill people. And so you can't help feeling that what's happening is, you know, this whole flow is now coming back out again, and the things that could have been stopped early on weren't happening, and now there's not enough resource to cope, not with just what's happening today, but with the legacy, if you like, with the waiting lists that were caused by that period when very little was happening apart from treating COVID.
I should just make the additional point. Yes, the King has put out a statement today, but he's the patron of a number of charities, and the Queen Consort was just at Maggie's on Thursday. They do an awful lot for cancer charities around the country.
Well, they absolutely do, yeah. Maggie's Cancer Care, we had the president of that on earlier on, who's known Camilla for a very long time. And I mean, I was just struck hearing that doctor. You don't get better PR than the monarch talking about men's health. I mean, you can't put a value on that and the difference that will make. But obviously the counter being, but is there the resources in the NHS to cope with all the people that may now go and get checked?
Yeah. The royal family don't tend to talk about their health, so the King has certainly made a determined choice that he's going to be public about this in the hope it helps other people. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. For our UK viewers, there have been lots of responses to what's happened today around the globe. President Joe Biden has been talking, saying that he hopes His Majesty experiences a swift and full recovery. And from Westminster, we've heard from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. I've shown you this before, but let me just go over it again. Wishing His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. No doubt he will be back to full strength in no time, he says, and I know the whole country will be wishing him well. And here's some of the reaction from the public here in London tonight.
Just found out, so it's quite devastating actually. Yeah, didn't know about that. It's sad to hear. Sad to hear. I hope he's bless him.
It's not nice to hear anyone's been diagnosed with cancer. I kind of feel bad for him. He waited all these years to be king.
I feel quite sad about it. I think it's interesting with all the news about him that it's not to do with kind of the prostate thing, and they've said it's kind of a different cancer. But hopefully they've caught it early and it will be a positive outcome for him.
You're watching BBC News. Let's cross the newsroom and speak to our religion editor, Aleem Maqbool, who's been getting some of the reaction from spiritual leaders across the UK today. We talked a little earlier, Aleem, that the King is a deeply spiritual man. What sort of reaction has there been?
Well, yes, a deeply spiritual man, but also one of his many titles, as well as being head of state, is Supreme Governor of the Church of England. He takes a keen interest in the working of the church. I spoke a short while ago to the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, who's known the King for some time, long before his coronation, and said that the King was a man of very strong faith. He said he was confident that that faith was going to sustain the King through his treatment and hopefully through his recovery as well. But this was his reaction soon after the news.
Obviously, it's come as a bit of a shock. We all knew that the king had a prostate condition that was being dealt with, but this is something else, and we don't quite know what it is. Nor should we, in a way. This is, first of all, a private matter for him and for his immediate family. But of course, he is the king, someone whom we love and care for. So my reaction is one of prayerful concern, prayerful hopefulness that this has been diagnosed early and will be treatable. So I'm praying for him.
Well, the Archbishop of York also said that he hoped that the King would be comforted by all the prayers from people across the country, whether they were Christian or from other faith communities.
Plenty of other reaction from across the various religions, Aleem, as well?
Yes, I mean, the King has been well known for decades now as having an interest in people of other faiths from a theological point of view, but also he has referred to Britain as a community of communities. He really takes an interest in the way people of other faiths and none have shaped this country, and as such he's interacted a lot with people of other faith groups, so it's of no surprise that people of a diverse array of faith backgrounds have come forward. All the faith leaders of the major faiths, as you would imagine. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who's head of the Catholic Church in England and Wales, he's the Archbishop of Westminster, said, on behalf of the entire Catholic community in England and Wales, I offer His Majesty our warmest wishes and assurance of steadfast prayers. Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, who knows the King very well, says, I'm saddened to have heard about His Majesty the King's diagnosis, but I know the Jewish communities of Great Britain and the Commonwealth will join me in wishing him a refuah shlema, a complete and swift recovery. And Zahra Mohammed from the Muslim Council of Britain has also tweeted saying, I'm saddened to hear about King Charles' diagnosis and extend my heartfelt wishes for His Majesty's strength and a swift recovery. But that is to name just a few faith leaders in this country and around the world who've come forward expressing their good wishes and prayers for the King.
Yeah, many of those, of course, have an open relationship with the King. He does call on them from time to time for their counsel as well. Aleem, thank you for that. Did you put any importance on the fact he was at Sandringham yesterday, beside the fact it was a public appearance?
The Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, would always have been at Sandringham at this time of year. Tomorrow, February the 6th, is the anniversary of the day that her father died. It was always a very special day, always a very family day. I can't say that that's why he was in Sandringham, but certainly it's a very special time of year. And we do know that he travelled from Sandringham to London today. We've seen the Royal Standard flying above.
I do remember that. She never
Palace.
left, did she, until I think February the 6th? Because there is, if anyone goes to that church, there's a plaque on the wall for her late father.
That's right, and that was the reason that she would come back to London after.
Yeah. It was his favourite place, wasn't it? Have you any thoughts on where the King might want to recuperate? I know he's at the palace tonight. That is a statement in and of itself. But I just wonder where he will put himself as he convalesces.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Potentially Windsor. Of course, Windsor has the advantage of being very near Prince William and Catherine, because they live in Adelaide Cottage, which is in the shadow of Windsor's walls, in the grounds. It's very private. Is obviously very large, has lovely grounds, but he's got several places that he could, perhaps Highgrove, very personal to him. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, just a final word to you, just a minute left. What do you think happens from here?
Everyone will chew over it, but politically, by Wednesday, there's going to be, Prime Minister's question time in the House of Commons. It'll start very civilised. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak and everyone else piling in with their best wishes formally from the dispatch box. But then I think, healthcare is going to shoot to the top of the agenda, and the debate, when it moves on from the issue of just the monarch, when we get stuck into what exactly is the state of the NHS, that's going to become one of the most hotly contested things. And maybe something like small boats start to look a little bit less dominant than cancer and the health of the nation. And, it'll dominate right up to the general election.
Indeed so. You're looking at live pictures of Buckingham Palace. My thanks to Geeta Harry and Sarah Campbell for their company this evening. The Royal Standard, as you can see, flying there above the palace. The King is in residence. We'll continue our coverage here on BBC News. Plenty more, of course, on the BBC website as well. Do stay with us. You're watching BBC News.
Hello there. It's been a blustery, cloudy, but very mild start to the week for most.